So here are all of my encouragements for you all to make terrible decisions as I am the GM.
Ash has a crossbow bolt in her side, 0 dots in skirmish, and 0 dots in wreck. And I'm so excited to see this get even worse. So that's one vote for escalation.
Skelly has 3 guns and all the ammo.
Crossroads has no guns, but Crossroads is a gun powered by ghosts.
Have we established that your guns are special to you? I feel like we're establishing that your guns are special to you.
Before this crew, they were my only friends.
You've known us for 5 days. You've known
really
those guns a lot longer.
These are my babies.
Yeah.
I just want to say, Rowan was starting to do this, and then he realizes to harvest, this doesn't help. Like, don't do that.
This is not.
No.
This is
Like,
not
don't do this.
nothing.
Yeah.
Doing this to an executioner?
Yeah, that's not
I
what
was
you
just
want.
like this, like...
We call that the go sign, you know? Like, yeah.
Oh, man.
This theme's great. I will do a fortune roll. Notes. No thoughts. Head empty. 1! I rolled a 1!
Yep. Hello, everybody. I'm going to do a thing that suddenly escaped me very immediately when
The
I pressed
interaction
the button the
was-
first time.
Oh.
This time I'm interrupting everybody live.
Oh! We've been interrupted, guys.
Hello.
Dun dun dun.
Oh no!
Dun, dun, dun.
There's no better interruption than one that you weren't expecting. Hello, everybody.
Holy crap.
Usually I would go to a completely different screen where I talked to all of you privately as if all of these people weren't here yet. But I decided, in the spirit of the holidays, we would do an impromptu thing, as the holidays are wont to do to the people that you love. Just show up at your doorstep and say, hey, we're here, do you want to hang out with us? So, me and my strange friends are here, so we can talk more about the wonderful experience that we had playing The Case of the Cindered Seal, our Speculate special event on this channel, twitch.tv/arvaneleron, because we had a lot of fun playing it, I had a lot of fun GMing it, and also I just missed all of these cool people and it's the holidays and I wanted to spend time with them. So I just kind of engineered circumstances for that to happen, and that's why we're here. So, hi everybody. I'm so glad that you're all joining me this evening, and we're going to have a very eager conversation about all of the hijinks that we have gotten into. But first, I have with me a piece of paper that I have consistently written down all of the things, all of the housekeeping notes on this channel that I try not to forget on a regular basis because I forget them often. Because there are a lot of things to mention about this channel because so many cool things are happening on this channel. So first and foremost, !RTube is the YouTube channel where you can find VODs of all of the content that has been streamed here, including The Case of the Cindered Seal, if you have missed all 20 episodes of this 4-episode series. As well as all of the other cool things that we do on this channel. !RTweets will give you access to Greg's Twitter, where Gregory Wilson, aka Arvan Elron, is consistently erudite and thoughtful, especially during the Christmas season. If you want to hear how cool Greg is, you can do that on Greg's Twitter at your leisure. !RCord will give you access to the Discord channel, where all of us strange friends, as well as the other cool people in this community, gather on a regular basis to be cool and be very smart, and also get updates about when other things are going to happen here. !Arftreon will give you access to Greg's Patreon, through the support of which we can have content streaming on this channel in the first place, including The Case of the Cindered Seal. If it weren't for your support on that Patreon, I would not have the computer that allows me to stream in the first place, for which I am still very grateful, because I consider it a perpetual Christmas gift, and I'm very thankful for that. So if you want to support the channel, you can do so there at Greg's Patreon. Speculate will give you access to not only the Speculate website, where you can hear episodes of the Case of the Cindered Seal and the other Speculate content that we make, but will also give you access to the Patreon that you can support Speculate's content, which will be very noteworthy because we are going to talk very briefly at some point this evening about what 2022 will look like on Speculate, just for the strange friends. So I hope that you stick around and hear what we have in store for that. Our shop will give you access to Greg's shop, where you can find some cool things related to some of the content on this channel. And I am in mild talks about adding a piece of merch to that thing at some point very soon. So hopefully that happens very soon. So you will hear more about that at some point. Icarus give you access to Greg's graphic novel Icarus and Jelinek, the award-nominated Icarus and Jelinek graphic novels, which are really, really dope. Grey Shade KS will give you more information about the Grey Shade trilogy that is still in the works. I know that Greg is being very patient with me as I hand in some cool things that I've documented about that, so please look out for more information about the Grey Shade trilogy when those things come out. Library will give you information about Tales and Tomes from the Forbidden Library, Greg's collaboration with Alligator Alley Entertainment, a very wonderful D&D 5e source book, which I think is really cool. And of course, BLM. On this channel, we still assert and affirm the value of Black lives in the United States and everywhere. And it is very important for us to not only be informed about those issues, but be informed about how we can assist in the work that the movement is doing. And help now, especially during the holidays. It is increasingly important for you to reach out to people when you need help and reach out to people when they need help. So if you need resources or encouragement and to find ways that you can be helpful to the people who are struggling, especially during this period, please check out those resources. And with that, my strange friends are here. And we just wanted to kind of hang out and talk about this silly game that we had. And I'm glad that you're here to join us. So I'm going to ask all of these lovely, cool people to please introduce themselves by telling you all. So please tell all of these lovely people in chat who you are, what you do, and who you were playing in the Case of the Cindered Seal. Starting with Valerie.
Hello, hello. I am Valerie Valdes. I am the author of Chilling Effect and Prime Deceptions. Prime Deceptions is going to be on sale tomorrow for $1.99 if you don't have it yet. So, check that out. I have a cat. Her name is Inara. She has decided to gift me with her presence. And I have been playing Carissa Skelly Skellcowlin, pronouns she, her, the team's hound.
Nice. Next, Mike.
Hey everybody, I'm Mike Underwood. I write as Michael R. Underwood, and I stream at twitch.tv/turbotango, which is, I think, more than a little bit Arv's fault because he makes it look good. I am the author of Annihilation Aria, a found family space opera adventure for fans of the Ava Innocente series. It's going to be a thing. People are like, oh yes, the Ava Innocente books and this and this and this and pop culture smartness. Yeah, I will never not brag on those books. In this game, I played Ring Dalmore, a haunted veteran. He, him pronouns for me, they, them for Ring. And Ring, who I thought Ring was at the start of the series and who I understood Ring to be at the end is very different, and that was cool.
I would very much like to hear more about that. Also, I'll just idly say that one of the things that I'm looking forward to in the future is seeing Mike's books and Valerie's books on the same bookshelf somewhere, just because they're so very alike that we've conditioned people.
They are also close in name. Underwood and Valdes often get put together. It happens.
It has to happen. I'm looking every time I go to an American bookstore. I'm gonna look out for that now. Now that you've put that in my brain, I'm just saying. Next, Jeoi.
Da, 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 da. Hello, it is Yoi Gawain Lin, game and fiction writer, player of one Crossroads, who was the ex-Whisper, definitely Hull, definitely made of meat, um, strange friend who electrocuted a lot of people in the beginning of the campaign and electrocuted fewer people at the end of the campaign. Um, and like Mike, I had very different ideas of who Crossroads was at the very beginning versus the very end. So that was also a journey for me. And uh, just to foreshadow a little bit of discussion later on, this is also the first time I went into a campaign with a very blank slate of what a character was. So the whole journey was a bit of a trust exercise in everyone, which turned out great. So I am very happy.
Nice. I definitely want to touch on that as well later on because I think that you accidentally stumbled upon a thing that made this game great, but we'll get to that point very soon. And last but definitely not least, Iori.
Happy time zone, everybody! Iori Kusano, Clarion with this class of 2017, they them pronouns. Find me on Twitter at Iori Kusano. That is IORI. Don't be like File 770 and spell my name with an L.
Oh God.
I played our Lurk of the Flame the Ash, who was, at the beginning of the campaign, trying to convince everybody that she'd lived in Akros her whole life and her name was Ashlyn Pharos. So, definitely my understanding of Ash evolved as we played, but I think Ash's understanding of herself changed pretty significantly as well, which is a really exciting journey.
Nice.
And I'm so glad I got to take it with my strange friends.
I'm so glad that we got the opportunity to do this cool thing. Also, I keep forgetting whenever we do this to actually introduce myself, so I'm trying not to forget it this time. Hi, everybody. I'm Brandon O'Brien. I am a writer, poet, game designer, and a podcaster, and a bunch of other things. I am one of the hosting triumvirate of Speculate alongside Mike and Gregory Wilson, who owns this channel that we are presently streaming on. And the Fugitives crew sheet that all of these lovely people played with, in the case of the Cindered Seal, was a thing that I made. Because I wanted us to do a cool thing. Very sillily. So I made an entirely different crew for Blades in the Dark, and it was fun. And I'm glad that I got to share not only the act of playing with all of these cool people, but I got to make a thing for them, and they enjoyed the thing, which means that it didn't suck, and that's all that matters. So yeah, thank you so very much for diving into this thing with me. One of the things I kind of want to start with first is I told y'all that this is going to be 4 sessions long. And y'all didn't get upset with me when we played session 5.
I just want to call attention to the fact that Brandon left completely out of his introduction that he won a Hugo like last week.
Fire won a Hugo, of which I am a member. I'm trying not to brag.
Of which you are the poetry editor. We're bragging for you now.
Oh god.
That's
yes.
what strange friends do, Brian. We brag for each other.
Oh Lord. Thank you so very much. That happened. I own a Hugo. That's a thought that still can't solidify in my brain, so I'm not going to think about it this evening. But yes, oh Lord, thank you all in chat for being so nice. Good Lord. I'm legit gonna actually blush, so we're not gonna talk about the Hugos anymore. So, about the game, the case of the Cindered Seal. I guess my first question, a question that I've asked regularly after every session, when we have our little brief chats just before we all go to bed after the game, is what did you think of the game? Did you enjoy that? I know it's a very simple softball question, but still, I part anxiety and part genuine curiosity about the experience. What did you how did you feel after the entirety of those 20 games?
I was happy and sad. Happy that we did the thing, but sad that there wasn't more. In the classic, but this was wonderful. Mine.
I was often confused and delighted in equal measure.
Okay. I hope that was good confusion. I hope it wasn't just, is the game working? Is this supposed to happen?
Because like I played a fair bit of Forge in the Dark games and like run some in years past, and I had expectations about how a Forge in the Dark game works, and that's just the accreted kind of mental average that I've made of stuff before, not this is how it actually needs to work or how it works best. And so there were definitely times when I had to like rework my brain and my expectations, because we ended up doing this thing where we swung between slice of life, like big emotion, into like cool critical world building, and then just like wild explosions. Mm-hmm. And it all fit together. It just it was multimodal in a way that I wasn't expecting.
Nice. I'm glad that we could have had that experience, because like one of the first times that I had played Blades in the Dark was actually with you on a previous session of Speculate. You GM'd what was like one session for us in play that I think turned it into 3 or 4 recorded episodes, where what was seemingly a very straightforward social plan turned into, how do we catapult this old lady out of this building at top speed, which I really enjoyed, because we were all committed to the narrative. This was genuinely an emotionally delicate situation, but we were also committed to being willing to be reckless, because the game allows us to think on the fly. And I really enjoyed that experience of things just kind of happening, and I kind of wanted to replicate that as much as possible, which is why I wanted to focus as much as possible on something supernatural, because that gave us room to not only do a lot of very intense world building, but for that world building to lead into mechanical situations where you often wasn't sure what was going to happen, and were encouraged to just do things, and I liked all of the things that you were doing, so I just kept encouraging you. So that was fun for me as a GM. I just wanted to be sure that was fun for you all as well. That you didn't feel like I was constantly bombarding you with weird stuff that you didn't really enjoy.
The world building was definitely the most exciting point for me, and I was often worried that like my role playing and acting was not doing it justice. Like, we definitely had a bunch of sessions where we'd end and I'd just be like, I was the weak link in the team.
That's like, not true.
I think I was putting a lot of pressure on myself, because this was my first time doing an actual play, but I listened to so much like very produced actual play, and the experience of doing it live is so different. Mm-hmm. Looking back on my performance, there was a lot of stuff I would have loved to fix in post.
Through that lens, I get where you're coming from. Like, I know that I know that a live actual play is a different beast, so I don't judge myself very harshly overall. But if I had the ability to produce a thing, I would have done a lot of things a lot differently. Like, in what would have been our 3rd session, if I'm not mistaken, like somewhere around our 3rd or 5th session, I wrote a letter from Runa to Crossroads that I actually wanted to be much longer. I don't actually have the longer version of that text anymore, unfortunately, because I lost that notebook. But the intention was, let's like do a thing, let's draw out some emotion right now. And then I was like, nope, we're running out of time. You don't need to hear these lines anymore, which sucked, because I would have loved for that to like still physically exist. I would love for certain things to be like their best possible thing. Um, but in a live performance, those things kind of turn out differently, and I'm not like the way that they did turn out is still perfectly fine and beautiful to me personally.
Yeah, it was a really valuable experience in teaching myself to just judge myself less harshly. Which, fantastic. This was a human growth journey I needed.
Nice. Which I'm
For
going
me, it
to.
was.
Nope,
Sorry.
sorry, continue.
Yeah, in a similar vein, for me, it was definitely a lesson in trusting the process a little bit more, because usually whenever I come up with a character, I have like the name, the background, the story leading up to the point of the game. And for Crossroads, I only had the name of the hull. I only had who made the hull, how long the hull has been around, and then everything before that, aside from the fact that Crossroads had been a Taikarosi person, was just not in the picture whatsoever. So there were definitely points where in like during the game I was kind of panicking because I was just going, I don't actually know anything about this character that I'm playing, but I guess it's okay because it doesn't know either, so the panic is real.
I kind of want to touch on that very quickly, very briefly, if we could just kind of lean into some world building stuff, because I'll open by saying I perfectly understand that you had that concern, Yoi, because I had a different concern dealing with Crossroads, which is I want Crossroads to have a moment right now, but I don't want to settle on a thing about Crossroads Past that Yoi doesn't sign off on. Yoi, do you think that this is cool? No response. Do I want to do the thing anymore? It's like, that did happen quite a few times, but I'm still very grateful that we had opportunities that we could not only roll with those kinds of things on the fly, but that everybody was still on board with those decisions, obviously. And the moment that obviously stands out in my brain, and I'm sure it stands out in a lot of other people's brains, is meeting Hunger at the warehouse, where Iori, like a goddamn boss, makes up entire Severosi world building on the fly, just 45 minutes of like pure learning Severosi history in this moment. I'm like, god damn, I need to take these notes now. This is actually kind of juicy. Because we not only gave you all very interesting character moments through that, but we ended up learning more about the world as a result. Like, we are now establishing other elements of lore for this space thanks to your work. And I kind of want to know what that experience is like for y'all doing it. Because my experience watching it happen was, God, I'm the GM, and y'all are doing this work for me. I'm blessed. I don't need to think about this game anymore.
My experience there was panic, like full whiteout panic, spinning a line of pure bullshit, just seeing how far I could run.
I totally thought you'd written all of that in advance. Just for the record, I extremely thought you'd planned all of it. I was like, wow, that is all real good. Oh, wow. This is so impressive. I can't believe that they went through all of this. Like, wow. And then afterwards to be like, wait, you made it all right now? You made that up? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
The thing I knew about Ash and her relationship to Severosi culture going in is sort of drawn from my experience of being mixed race, in that, like, not only do I feel sort of disconnected and rejected from my Chinese heritage, I feel like I am actively bad at performing my Chineseness. And I projected that into Ash as, what if this person is just not good at living the traditional lifestyle of her culture? What if she is just fundamentally alienated and displaced? And I knew from the get-go that I wanted to look at the Severosi as a nomadic culture with a focus on movement, which would which is how I built out, okay, Ash definitely has some issues with anxiety and so forth. Ash craves stability.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I realized that horses had to be part of this, I was like, oh, well, horses are obviously terrifying. So now we have some sources of trauma.
Yeah, horses are actually.
I should have given Crossroads a horse head.
Oh God, no!
Their
That's the next.
Their
That's
legs
the next
are
highlight.
Next game.
Yeah.
Next game.
Next Blades game, just your hull is just the shape of a very large knight chess piece.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing that I found very intriguing, because I still think very, very deeply about like that warehouse scene, because I didn't know anything either. When we got there, I didn't even settle on characters' names yet. Which is how I've been playing regularly, that I just like wait for a decision to be made, and once we've settled on that decision, then I have to settle on the repercussions of that decision. So the things that delighted me about that moment was, first of all, that we are now establishing emotional beats for Ash as a character, because Ash committed to this. And given all of the things that you had already hinted to me about the antique store where Ash works and some of the things that are there, I was like the way that I read that character was that Ash has a complicated relationship to Severosi culture. First of all, because you're now living in a country that does not respect that culture, where that culture is not only alien, but people treat you with hostility. And that, as a result of that separation, Severosi living in Akaros, living in Duskwall, will be hostile towards you because they think that you're rejecting the thing that makes them different than this place that they're in. And how do we lean into that as much as possible while making that spiritual, because there is a through line of spirituality throughout the entire story. But also, now I'm learning things about what that culture would look like, because that doesn't exist in the book. In the book, in Blaze in the Dark rules as written, there is no Severosi language. But obviously, there must be a kind of thing that is spoken in Akaros for Severosi to understand each other that is not the same as whatever is actually taking place there. There must be a relationship to the spirit that has evolved as a result of moving in space. And all of those things, I was learning that you knew all of those things, that Ash knew all of those things, but hadn't thought about it in such a long time. And knowing that Ash was now in this circumstance where a room full of people who might just kill you have compelled you to make this decision, made me realize that those were the things that I wanted to settle on, so I settled hard. And that's why the Imperishable Wing exists. That's why every time you met another Severosi character, suddenly they're very religious. Because I thought that leaning more into that, but also giving opportunities to learn that people are not actually as cruel as they may be, was potentially rewarding. And then on Crossroads side, again, we didn't know anything about Crossroads at this point, and then we were establishing that maybe this is not true. Maybe we're just telling a story to this guy so we could get out of this room unscathed. What if it's not a story? Let's just decide that it's not a story. Let's just lean into this now. And both of those things opened up more things about the world for me as a GM, and gave me more narrative decisions that I could make that I thought were rewarding. Because I thought that I needed to pay that off, because that was really cool. Like, if you remember in that session, I didn't make you roll any sway. Because you convinced me.
You,
so you
should have, honestly. Like, at the end of that, I felt like, that was kind of unfair that Brandon just let me get away with all of that. I was supposed to have rolled for something at some point with how many lies I just told.
Like, mechanically, I would have stopped you at some point. Mechanically, like, 3 sentences in, I would have cut you off and told you, no, you need to roll before we could move any further. But by the time that you just kept going, I was like, it would be really unfair for you to exert all of this narrative energy, and then the die doesn't like you. Because then narratively, you've been standing in front of Hunger telling this story for 30 minutes, and then Hunger just goes, I don't believe you, and then you get severely injured. That would be terrible. So I didn't do that, because I thought that that was cool, and I wanted to establish that rule going forward as a result, that whenever you wanted to commit to that much world building, that I would value it. Because I thought that giving you an opportunity to flesh out the world meant that you were telling me what you wanted to see from the rest of the game.
I think that was one of the things that made this feel, I don't know if safe is the right word, but like it gave us the freedom to be creative about these things and to put ourselves out there like that, because we knew that you would let us. We knew that you weren't just going to give us some kind of gotcha, like you were saying, like, oh, well, now you have to roll, and okay, then it's all for naught. Because even if we rolled badly, you would take it into a different, interesting direction. And pretty much anything that we said, more or less, in the way of good improv, became canon. That was it. Nobody would just go, no, you can't do that because it contradicts, page 243 of the rule book or whatever. You just would be like, okay, and then keep going with it. And so that ability to make these things up on the fly, to enrich the world and add to the characters as we went, I think made for a really good vibe the whole time.
Yeah.
As someone whose character was primarily improv all the way through, just because of how blank the slate was, I definitely felt like that level of safety from everybody at the table, because it was like, okay, it's not just the GM who is like permitting everyone to pitch in, but I know if I put something forward, somebody else at the table will pick it up and run with it, and I don't need to worry about, well, you didn't have the whole backstory sketched out, so this is no. So yeah, it was very relaxing all the way around.
Speaking of world building, I'm really curious, Mike, how much time did you spend thinking about the infrastructure of the Porter system beforehand versus how much of that did you just bring up on the fly?
So going into session 1 of the case of the Cindered Seal, Ring Dalmore was a shift leader on the Porters, who were a faction that was just, these are people that work at the docks. And Dern is Ring's basically vice purveyor by being a higher higher level organizer for how the Porters operate, and everything else was discovered through roleplay, in terms of oh, okay, well, there's some kids who work for the Porters, and then Ring goes to Dern and they chat, and we get a bit of a sense of, okay, so Ring and Dern's relationship is maybe a little bit more closer to equal than I was expecting. And then we just found, we role played into what if Fagin but good.
Yeah. Which I liked a lot, actually. Just one of the things that I wanted to commit the story to for the sense of stakes ultimately is Duskwall is not a nice place to anybody who lives here, but people are nice to each other because this is not a nice place to live. So at some point, and I can't even remember when it had actually finally congealed. It may have been around one of Ring's downtime actions very early in the game. When we started realizing who the Porters were, because this is the first time that the Porters had appeared on screen. I was like, you don't see children in these kinds of stories because the experience of being a child in Duskwall must be absolutely horrendous. What if it's still not great, but they have a place where they can trust adults in their space? And I told that story, and you ran with it. So I realized that, because at some point I think I had briefly thought, maybe this is not where Mike wants to go. Maybe this will just maybe you'll just rewind from this point, and you didn't. So we just kept going, and being able to tell that story with you of young people knowing that there are adults that they can trust in this unruly world is actually really healthy. and I'm really glad we got the opportunity to do that in this game in particular. Especially like especially because I wanted to give you a great deal of those moments when you were actually being a mentor to them, and because you leaned into it in that moment in that downtime action. And I am pleased by the result, therefore, of coming near to the end where they were like revealing all of these other terrible things that were happening in the city, and you never looked down at them, you never judged them. And I mean, I trusted that you wouldn't as a character, but like the fact that we got to tell the story of young people learning that they had made a mistake and then being told, mistakes happen. Just make sure that you do what is necessary to be trustworthy in your space, because we don't want anything to happen to you or your kin. I really enjoyed being around that story, so I'm very grateful that you allowed us to tell that.
Yeah, I think in a lot of these cases, the parts that are really memorable to me, or where I feel like the world building got very deep and interesting, felt like the times when there were two or more of us in the group who were interested in some aspect of the society and were kind of tossing the ball back and forth to like, okay, I'm going to establish something, I'm going to toss it to you, and you're digging what I'm throwing, and so you're going to send it back to me with some kind of spin, and so it accretes both detail and meaning in the process of going back and forth. And I think we kind of organically, and then maybe subconsciously and maybe more consciously, depending, I'll be interested to hear back from the others, we had this contrast of versions of what it's like to be young in Duskwall for the porters and for the orphans of the orphanage. And so this is me kind of tossing to Valerie in terms of like, what was interesting, or what did you want to explore with like that version of what it's like to be young in a city like this?
Yeah, I mean, talking about stuff like Oliver Twist and what have you, I feel like I have a lot of breeding background in kind of the floofier Regency type stories where they don't tend to delve into the seedier side of what was going on in London at the time. It tends to be much more like, oh, everybody's going to marry a duke and there's 3,000 dukes and they all have perfect teeth. But like the experience of orphanages is often extremely brutal, and a world like Duskwall, which is predicated on sort of fantasy variations of places like London or St. Petersburg or kind of Venice even, but in the worst kinds of circumstances, there's no sun, there's literally no sun, it's all dark all the time. But I wanted to have someone who came from that background and kind of had survived it. And in when we first started, I wasn't sure whether I was going to go full grim with that experience or not. But I think ultimately I wanted to, because of the ability to contrast it with the porters, as a preferable alternative. Like, I think that in a lot of fiction today, there's sort of a tug between hope punk and grimdark as two ends of a spectrum, so to speak. And it's not to say that they actually are. It's not a spectrum. It's things can change and vary at different times, and you can explore different facets of it. But I think that our version of Duskfall was an attempt to look at better ways to live and accomplish these kinds of things, even in a very harsh and grim world. Like the notion that, well, life sucks, ergo, everything must suck equally all the time, is just factually untrue. And I think that being able to show a way that people can help each other, come together, care for the most helpless among them, so to speak. I think it was really good and important to have that contrast.
Hmm. And um, to that point about that kind of narrative energy, I do have a question both for Valerie and Jeoi, because like both of you kind of uniquely enter this space in a way that I really enjoyed, um, about one's relationship to being nice to oneself versus being nice to others, and the energy that you exert for both, because there are very unique moments in Skelly's case, where it is kind of obvious that uh, Skelly is frustrated by the the situation that everyone finds themselves in, and is like not overtly pleasant in a certain kind of way, not very cheery, not like very outgoing in that sense, but on a regular basis will go out of her way for other people on a regular basis, especially Crossroads. Um, and in Crossroads' case, not knowing a great deal about itself, um, and learning as a result from other people what it means to be outwardly kind after having a terrible experience in the past that you didn't actually even remember. Um, like, I'm very intrigued by how you both played that in particular, so I'm kind of curious if you had anything to say about that.
I can go first because I have a few half-formed thoughts on this, if that's okay, Val.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for Crossroads, I kind of built the approach a little bit directly from the playbook, because in the playbook for a whole, as played strictly as written, a whole is supposed to have a master or somebody who commands it, and a whole is supposed to obey three commands or three objectives. And the original idea behind Crossroads was purely a whole whose creator had died. So the impetus for all of this particular character's actions is gone. So now you have a character who by design is supposed to like be externally motivated, but now has to find that motivation internally completely, because that the original person is now not there. And as more of Runa kind of came to light and more of their relationship in life came to light, I thought, well, if Runa had known this person and had cared, quote unquote, enough about this person to create a hole out of them after accidentally beating them in the head with a forgotten relic, oops. I think, at least in my head, the idea was that Runa was a little bit soft in making Crossroads because she didn't completely narrow Crossroads down to three functions, because that's basically what a whole is. You're taking a person's soul, and in the playbook, the more that soul forgets who it was in life, the more XP it gains. You're taking that soul and you're narrowing it down to three functions. You're just taking a living person and narrowing them down to three things. So for Crossroads, three functions, basically, I was like, well, if Runa wanted to keep this person as true to life as originally, I think the main idea would be that Crossroads is curious. Crossroads always wants to know about things. Like, that's the impetus that keeps it going. It's always curious about what's right in front of it. It's not stopped by anything because it wants to know the next thing. That's why it's never truly stymied. Even if it's scared, it's like, oh, but what is this thing that's scaring me? Crossroads ultimately wants to protect things, and ultimately it cares about things. Those are the three things from life that stuck with it, and so like that was the foundation of who it was. And being with the strange friends were basically kind of like the manual of like, oh, how does this manifest, right? Because Ring is curious. Ring is the person who like gathers the information, puts it all together. Ring is a reflection of Crossroads' curiosity. The idea about caring, Ash is like very much a reflection of like that care. Ash cares very deeply about a whole lot of things, even if Ash would like to not think so. And Skelly is always there, you know, to hold the line for you. Skelly is the reflection of how Crossroads learned to protect people. So yeah, okay, maybe I electrocuted a lot of people, but really I had a really good role model, okay?
Oh my gosh, I'm actually tearing up. That is just so sweet.
Crossroads, that's the thing. Like Crossroads, like the three foundations of Crossroads are just very simple and also wholehearted. So Crossroads is not able to be cynical about things. Like the so it's not capable of grasping that Melvir actually doesn't like it. Because it's like, okay, yeah, I did blow up your house. Well, I can fix your house. So that's we're good now, right? And it's like, no, Melvir's scared of you.
I think we established pretty early on that Crossroads was the heart of the team. And honestly, once that dynamic was established, it was a huge load off for me. Because then I was starting to understand how the strange friends fit together. And a lot of that was that even though Ring was leading, we were all essentially orbiting Crossroads. And having that dynamic to fall back on made the role playing much easier for me.
Yeah, I was trying to think, how much were we actually in communication with each other when we made these 4 PCs? Because I feel like it was very little.
Barely at all.
No.
And we didn't do a session 0 to test or anything, which is like... When we did the funeral, I was worried. I was terrified. That was the most nerve-wracking experience.
I was also worried. I was like, this person made me and I don't know who they are and they're dead. Oh no.
See, so this was something that I thought about, right? Because the funeral was actually easy mode. I designed the funeral precisely because I wanted you to be in a situation where you didn't know anything, and therefore when circumstances suddenly arose, you were being motivated by trying to learn. So I thought it would have been curious, given what we had known about Crossroads earlier, to decide that it was Runa, the person who made it, who had passed, and that everybody else's relationship to Runa is tangential. That Runa is just popular in the city for a reason no one can really describe, like just one of those neighbors who everybody likes but no one can say why it's ever come up before. And then you're put in a tense situation at the funeral, and now you have to decide, well, what do I know about Runa? Nothing. Which is curious because because the other thing is that is very curious about Runa is, when I made her, I had no intention of Runa sucking. But Runa sucks. Runa is actually a terrible person, and that happened organically through game. That's the part that I'm very curious about. That, like, following Crossroads' lead, that's when we discovered Runa was terrible, maybe. And I was very nervous about that as well. That, like, and I mean terrible in the sense of, not that she was, like, deliberately, consistently cruel, but that it was obvious that she didn't know how to care for you then or now, and struggled even at the point when she knew that she was going to die, with the fact that she didn't know how to do that, but that you were both the only people that you had for each other. That just happened. I wanted Runa to be nice. I wanted Runa to be cool. I wanted Runa to be like one of those very popular neighbors who was like good with money, and everybody loved her because she was very generous and had a lot of dough, and that people thought that maybe a thing for money happened, and maybe you were responsible, or maybe you weren't, and then it just turned out that she was a terrible person. That just kind of happened. I'm sorry. I still feel kind of bad about that, because that meant that I also forced that storyline upon you, but like that it just kind of generated.
I think it worked out in the end though, because like, again, I don't know, Mike, if this ever came across to your mind, but for me, Bruna was kind of like the dead foil to Ring a little bit, in terms of the person that Crossroads expected to look up to or naturally wanted to look up to. Because just because, like, again, that external motivation of somebody disappeared doesn't mean like the need for someone to look to disappeared. So yeah, because Crossroads didn't start off saying, oh, Ring is smart, we should do what Ring does. It's like that happened along the way. So like for me, definitely I was playing it as though, oh, Ring is kind of Runa, whoever Runa was, but better.
Right, because I think we ended up where every character had a mirror. if we follow this. And the quality of the mirror is different. And I'll pitch my set, and then y'all can tell me if you have different interpretations here. If Ring's mirror is Runa, Crossroads' mirror is the other hall, Skelly's mirror is Casta, and Ash's mirror is Hunger. And like, okay, so each of these characters have like, they're aligned in certain areas, and they have different perspectives or different experiences. And so for Ring, like the work of a spider to unweave and come to understand the web that someone has already woven, and you knew who they were, but you did not know they were doing that thing. So a deep sense of this city is bigger and scarier and more messed up and interconnected than Ring knew at the beginning of the story. And that's an interesting challenge to present to a character whose way of surviving and being in the world and like finding like motivation and value has been in planning and taking care of people. And so having a person who had plans and tried to take care of people do those in a way that created disaster is a great prompt for then another character to address.
Yo, can we talk about Skelly and Casta though? Because holy shit, that storyline, those episodes, oh my god. Every time we had a Skelly Casta moment, I left just like completely shook by what a great actress Valerie is.
For real though. I will open by saying I think I asked a lot of you in particular, Valerie, when it came to like Skelly's backstory, because there are a lot of things that I know both of us didn't know at that point, and we were trying to figure out what they were. But there were things that I was hitting on, and I was like, all of these things are very traumatic though. Terrible childhood life. A hostile relationship to food, bullying, like nope, this is not cool. I need to be absolutely sure about all of these things. And you were very gracious when I wanted to like ask questions about those things as a result. But those things kind of naturally materialized in Casta being an unnecessarily cruel person. And it's very interesting, Casta being your mirror in that sense, because both of you are very good at your work. But you are good at your work because it is your job and you must be good at it. And Casta is good at it because she likes hurting people. And I spent a lot of time, especially in that warehouse fight, like very curious, like, am I doing what is necessary in this scene to both be emotional and be safe for you at the same time? Because that can be very intense, and I know that a lot of that was giving you flashback moments to establish, well, what was your relationship like in the orphanage, with Casta in particular, with other children? How does it affect your relationship with children in general, with like even as far as with your own body? And what resulted was kind of a lot for me, even because of your graciousness. So I kind of want to hear what you thought about that play.
Yeah, I think in the same way that just you would take sort of an idea and just go with it in a really profound and deep and good direction. It's a lot of what we ended up doing, I think, in this game was interrogating the world and how it functioned and applying that to our characters in different interesting ways. And so the interrogation for that character, I remember when we were first discussing Casta in terms of like, okay, you know, who is your enemy? Because Blades in the Dark basically has your allies and your enemies. And you've got, you know, I had Melvir, who was my ally, who was essentially my vice purveyor, more or less. But also a friend, which for Skelly, I think that she was the kind of person who doesn't like to call people friends because she doesn't want to be presumptuous on the one hand, and she's scared of it on the other hand, because growing up in an environment like the orphanage she was in. And we don't want to like tar all orphanages with the same brush necessarily, because like Mike was saying in the chat, you know, you can choose to show different facets of things and explore them different ways. But the one that she came from, I think, was a place of fairly profound neglect, but also the kind of hardship where if you valued something, it would probably be taken from you, if not by one of the adults, then by a bully like Casta. And so to express preference and value would have been a dangerous thing to do for your own sort of mental well-being, which is really rough. But like initially, I remember saying that I wanted Casta to basically be like Azula from Avatar, and that isn't to say that Skelly was, you know, Zuko, because I don't think so. But the overlap there is in a person who was raised in the same environment as this other character, but instead of coming out of it profoundly, I guess damaged would be a good word for it. They instead turned away from that darkness and still did the thing that they were good at, but in a much less bad way. I often reach for the Brooklyn Nine-Nine quote, "Nice motive, still murder." And so, like, I feel like that's Casta, where you could be like, well, she grew up in a really bad orphanage and everything sucked and whatever. And it's like, lots of people grow up in really bad places and don't become bad people. Like, they can't, you know, get rid of that experience, but they can overcome it and they can become better. And if they don't, that doesn't mean that they're like some kind of profound failure. One hopes that there is always a kind of redemption available to most people. But Casta was a character who consistently made bad choices because she was a bad person, because she did delight in doing the bad things and causing harm. And yet, in the same way as Azula, you think back and you're like, gosh, she was a 14-year-old girl. At any point, she could have gone into therapy and maybe gotten better. Like, one would hope, right? But yeah, I wanted to explore that, and you took it, and you just took it to really deep and profound and good places. And by good, I mean hard, but I feel like dramatically satisfying.
I'm glad that I could give you that, because that was one of the stories that I was very careful about, precisely because I wanted to do it right, because there was meat on that bone that I really, really cared about, and I wanted, in this, for the same reasons that I really enjoyed the porters as secondary characters, because it gave us opportunities to see the best experiences that children can have in this space. I wanted as carefully as possible to tell a story about Duskwall is still a bad place for children, this is how, while therefore being able to lean on everything that we had already seen and known about Skelly as a confirmation that even when that happens, it doesn't have to turn you into Duskwall. Because you suffer those experiences that you didn't have to, and still manage to find your own humanity through that process, however harshly, which still sucks. And like, outside of the fact that this is a game that I GM'd, I actually hate everybody that I put you against in that scene. I spent a lot of time in this game actually being very upset at the decisions that occurred. But I'm glad that we got the opportunity to be able to fulfill those things in a way that was not only safe for everybody, but allowed us to explore some of those things in a productive way.
I think it was really cool too how we got to play off of Crossroads again as a character, where it was kind of like, you know, not just how does Crossroads relate to everyone else in terms of its fulfilling of its primary functions and the ways that each of the other characters sort of, you know, appealed to those, but also just like the ways that our characters were affected by and changed by Crossroads. Like, I feel like Skelly felt safe with Crossroads in a way because there were no like expectations. It was a very kind of pure friendship that they had, where it was just like Skelly would show up and be like, hey, what's up? And Crossroads would be like, I made a bunch of food and I don't eat food. And not that Skelly knew that at the time, obviously, but it was just very like and not transactional, but just kind of pure and no expectations, and just like they could just hang out and be okay together.
I would eat the food and then give you the food. I'm
Not
just sad
creepy at
that
all.
I'm happy how it came out that Crossroads was actually a hole, because Ring just had that beautiful moment of, you never told us you were a whisper, and then looks over and like there's a hole right there. So I just love that moment. I would never trade it for anything, but at the same time, it was just such great yakety sax kind of comedy of, okay, eat the food. Hey Skelly, I have some food. Do you want some?
Can I ask how Truffle got his name? Because I definitely came up with like this deep backstory, because like a truffle is rare and valuable and expensive, so this must be a reflection of this cat's value to Skelly, right?
Oh, I thought it was because truffles are kind of round and have dirt on them, and that's what a cat is, sort of. I sound like Crossroads now. I'm a parody of myself.
No, but
honestly.
what's great is that the overlap between Crossroads and Skelly there is very accurate, because it was like, hey, okay, so this is a cat that's kind of scruffy and gray. What in Duskfall is also scruffy and gray? Oh, mushrooms. That was basically it. And then of the different names for mushrooms, truffle just is the most fun one. And so I feel like Skelly would pick maybe an expensive mushroom, but also I think that the way mushrooms are cultivated in Duskfall means that even expensive ones like truffles are potentially much more common than they would be in our world.
I remember some people on, I think, Twitter a month or two ago, like arguing that way more people names should be mushroom based in Duskwall, because it's like, okay,
Yes, though.
like, because people take, like, especially historically, if the sun has been broken for hundreds of years, like, and this kind of makes me think of like very other science fiction fantasy stuff that's like super mushroom based. But I'm glad that we got like a version of that in how truffle is named.
Yeah, but also just like the way that we would throw out different food stuff when we were playing, because that's something that isn't explored extensively. I mean, there is a whole food section in the manual. Let's not say that there isn't, because there absolutely is. But the food section in the manual is more just like, these are kind of the raw ingredients that are typically going to be available to people, less than how would they be cooked, how would they be served, how would they be prepared. And so again, thinking about stuff like Regency England and other areas, the notion of street food is much more prevalent in a lot of these different cultural experiences than it is in what we have today in America and with our culture and all that kind of crap. But you go back to these other things, people didn't have kitchens, they didn't cook their own food, they literally could not. Maybe there was a shared kitchen. Yari, what are you yelling, Iori?
Go off. I love the rant about like street food carts in ancient Rome,
But
and how
for
everybody just
real.
eats beer and onions if they're left to their own devices.
Everybody. And so just, and also, I'm sorry, I'm Hispanic, and so it's like, okay, it's a meat pie. No, it's an empanada. I don't care. Y'all are gonna eat empanadas. It's like people get up in arms about, well, you can't have coffee in a fictional setting because blah blah blah. I'm like, shut up. It's coffee. It's coffee. Just drink the damn coffee. Enjoy it, please.
So you get to a thing that I really enjoyed. Like, one of the things that I like about our world building is that we embraced a thing that is obvious about the Blades in the Dark rules, which is there is nothing obvious about Duskfall in the Blades in the Dark rules. If you like, I like other games. I'm not gonna call other games names, but there is a tendency for players who are accustomed to picking up a book in their favorite game, knowing that there is a ton of lore in it, to know that when they're playing a game, there is already something in the book that will tell them this is what happens in this place, this is what people do here, this is what people eat here, this is what people wear here. And even though Blades in the Dark is obviously using cultural touchstones that exist, they're not cultural touchstones that we're all familiar with outside of media. So I was very comfortable on a regular basis leaning into the idea that sometimes we'll just do a thing, and that is canon in the world now, because the book isn't going to tell us. What are we eating? We're eating empanadas. Why? Because we said so and we're here. So obviously it means that one of these cultures makes empanadas as a street food now, and that's canon. John Harper isn't gonna tell me no. Is he here? So yeah.
Wait, is he here though? Because
Is he here
it's
today?
possible.
Hi,
If
John. Good book.
Hi,
Good
John, if
game.
you're here.
Harper is
Thank
here,
you, John.
if Harper is here, I'm not judging. I'm just
Well, 'cause
saying. One of the
something
things that I adore about Blades, more so than I would adore any other game, is that it encourages us to fill in those blanks, and we were willing to lean into those blanks very eagerly. So,
Yeah, I was gonna say just a little bit earlier that the game very quickly, and I think Brandon, this you have to accept responsibility for, fostered an environment of permission, and that you kind of declaimed and like disavowed total narrative authority, so that we had the space and were encouraged to pick things up, so that the world was made by everybody together and specifically in conversation, and that Blades as a book in the setting materials given and in the way that the design elements are constructed and the tradition it's written in from Apocalypse World, and back from that into like the Post-Forge and the Forge games and all that kind of stuff, is that there's a lot of world building. It's substantial, it's detailed in pencil.
yeah. And you hit on a thing that was kind of obvious for me from a design perspective, because I mention it a lot when like people ask me about working on Sound Clash, for instance, because it was a thing that I drew on primarily from Blades, which is a lot of games are beholden to, well, a lot of the culture around RPGs is beholden to the idea that the game master is God, because master's in the name, and I kind of hate that. I know Blades also refers to you as a game master, but like the implication as a result is, from a narrative perspective, the GM is the director of the story. They know the story goes, and they're ensuring that players are hitting the beats that they're supposed to, but that's not true. Which is why in Sound Clash I refer to that role as the stage manager, because the stage manager is not in control of story. The stage manager is in control of making sure that the curtains open and that there's nothing on stage that is going to severely hurt anybody, and that when you know that you're supposed to be on in 5, you're on in 5. That's my job. I want you all to be in control of narrative because it's your story, and I'm here to encourage you to tell the story that you want to tell.
It's funny. I was trying to explain a few months ago how this works to some of my local friends, and I actually wound up calling you our producer, Brandon, because like your job is, you pick our jobs and you send us there, but we still have control over how we do the job to some extent.
Yeah.
Like you set expectations.
Like
also?
Yes.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, the thing that I value about that role is a lot of the way that a lot of other RPGs are phrased, and the ways in which people have engaged in those games assume that the power that a GM has is absolute, to the point where they get to make decisions about the world and how it affects you. And that they can do those things without your consent, essentially. It's where the idea of a tyrannical GM comes from. That if the rules as written gives you the power to do a thing, you can do that thing, and the players can't say no unless the dice tell them to. But that's not good story either, because it means that I don't care about the things that you want. And I'm here because I care about that. I want you to tell me the story that you want to tell.
I think like you were talking before about the scene with Hungar, where you were just like, just let it ride, instead of forcing a dice roll that could potentially contradict what we were doing or undermine it or in some way detract from it. It's better to just let the story proceed and see where it goes. And I think that functioned really well in a lot of instances in the game. And also like the use of fortune rules for when we were potentially doing something that was very sketchy and we weren't sure about it. I think that was really, really useful too, where it was kind of like, all right, there's a thing that you, as the producer, need to tell us or want us to know or want to inject into the scene, but want to make it more kind of natural and and so that mechanic I think worked very well. And it made us more, again, safe to be able to contribute stuff whenever it felt like a good time for it. It created a safe space for us to just RP, let the RP go. And it also gave us enough flexibility to rule of cool things in ways that were really fun and satisfying.
In hindsight, I'm grateful for how sketchy the actual world building of Blades is, and that so many of us came in with very little idea of what it was going to be. Because in hindsight, if I had known more about Severosi culture, I would have been really tempted to lore dump early on. So making it up as we go along actually paced the reveals so much better.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see what it'll be like when we do a game where the world building is collaborative from the jump, but we don't have a text to start from, because it gives us more freedom in certain areas, but more responsibility. And I think that'll be interesting and fun.
One of the most satisfying games that I've ever played in was a play-by-post game, in which literally the function of the game was that we had the posts, the in-character posts, and then separately we had a shared wiki. And so someone would mention something in one of the posts, like say Porter's Day, and then someone else would make a wiki entry for Porter's Day and explain what Porter's Day is using whatever context clues were available in the post, but then also just putting their own spin on it. And that's sort of what we were doing this whole time, is just somebody would toss something out and then someone else would pick it up and then keep going with it. And it enriched everything so immensely that it was great.
Yeah. And also, I just want to say as an aside to Mike, one of the things that kind of emerged in my brain as we were getting deeper into this game is it would be really rad to just pick another part of Akaros and to draw a map for that and play a game there where there are no expectations for like the rules that have been set up in Duskfall, and we could just like create our own circumstances there. But I need to learn how to draw maps first. So
Yeah,
that's
Stray
gonna take a
friends
while.
retire to herd sheep.
I'm really curious to see what the new Akaros setting book looks like. The one that is in development, kind of with, I believe Harper is involved, but not the primary creative
Yes,
person.
immediately I know that it exists. I know who's supposed to be a part of it, and their names escape me all of a sudden.
I can probably find it by looking at the Big Bad Con schedule.
Yes, it's probably because that's where they announced it. And I remember hearing that was happening and going, that's gonna be rad. People of color are writing a Blades book. I want to play that game. I want to play that setting. I think they're setting it in Severos, in fact, which undoes all of the canon that we have established here. But I'm still very excited to see what it looks like.
I think it's maybe the Dagger Isles.
Right. No, yes, it is the Dagger Isles.
So if it's the people from Big Bad Con, Pam Punzalan and Nichelle Schneider.
Right. Yes. Pam Punzalan is brilliant, by the way, and I'm very excited, if only because they're involved. So I'm very eager to see it. But yeah, maybe when that comes out, we will decide to do a thing, because I think that would be really cool. But I wanted to ask, from a mechanical standpoint, because Speculate is all about how RPG mechanics aid narrative. And I know for some, but not all of us, this was not only first time playing Blades, but the first time playing Blades while being observed by an audience. So I was kind of curious for everybody, what is your favorite mechanic in Blades in the Dark? If you have one. Because I do. But I'm going to wait until after at least Mike gives me an answer, because my answer is specifically for Mike.
I'll say it first, it's clocks. I'm sorry. I wrote a whole damn post about how to outline your novel with clocks because clocks are just like as soon as that came to be, I was like, oh, clocks. Yes. I don't know. It just appealed to me immensely.
It does. It's perfect. And also that essay is brilliant. And you should link it in chat for people who haven't seen it because that's actually
Link it.
it's actually a very dope essay. Using
For me,
clocks to
it would
time. Oops, sorry.
no. For me, it was stress, but I had to go elsewhere to learn how to use it. And this is totally on Mike because Mike has a game in development that we've been playing. And because Mike's game is more episodic in nature, it taught me to stop thinking of stress as something to avoid at all costs and instead think of it as a resource I have at my disposal to spend. Once I internalized that lesson, I was able to play much more adventurously, take bigger risks, and make more impact on the game overall.
I mean, it's designed for stress to do that, and I'm very excited that you got the opportunity to learn that through play because you take. I think I can pinpoint the moment when you did learn that point, which was the several sessions long elongated fight with 3 cops in the snow.
Yes, the episode where we failed our own kidnapping, right?
Yes.
The episode when you successfully did not become kidnapped, but did successfully become severely injured.
Yes. Hang on. Let's go back to that for a second because we'd been talking for a while behind the scenes about how Ash had not used any of her lurk abilities basically ever in the story. So we were like, let's set something up that's going to let us just use the lurk playbook a little more aggressively. Let's get Ash kidnapped so she has to escape. That's going to involve so much sneaking.
Yes, we were all like, yes, good. This is amazing. Collaborative planning. Awesome. Next episode's going to be great. And then we got to the next episode, and I was just holding Ash like a small baby in the snow. And I was like, Crossroads would never just put Ash down and then let her go. Like,
Jeoi and
nothing...
I both realized, oh, wait, no. Both our characters would fight in this instance.
Yeah.
Like... I think that was the closest moment to despair that I had in the game because I was like, oh no, we had a great plan to get Ash kidnapped. And Ash is telling Crossroads to leave her in the street. I was like, but the robot wouldn't. The robot literally just killed a man because his friend, like, they spooked Ash. Like, Crossroads would not leave Ash. I'm failing.
So, like, I will say this as somebody who actually had recently re-listened to that, like, small group of episodes on the podcast because I remember the, like, abject confused joy that I felt when y'all got into the restaurant. Room full of people who do not speak the language that you speak, all waiting in the middle of the night in the middle of the snow, confused by your, like, flustered entry into their space. A man enters behind Ash and attempts to put his hand on Ash, and then immediately is vaporized. And then after that's just people dying in confusing and painful ways for the rest of the night. Because not only did I want to pay forward the fact that you were committing to trying to perform this moment, but things had already gotten weird and Crossroads is present and somebody is already gone. Like, we turned that guy to mist. He doesn't exist anymore. There isn't enough of him to get to heaven. So I just leaned into, let's just cause more carnage later on in the night. And at that point, Ring had already just like dove onto somebody with a spear in hand, and that was already delightful. So I just wanted to give everybody a cool moment, and I am really glad about that scene in particular. But yes.
That big damn heroes moment from Ring was just choice.
So that actually leads into my my favorite mechanic as expressed in the series, which is resistance. Because having played other Forge games, I knew how powerful resistance was. And in play, it kind of came to the point of like, oh, the reason why Mike the player resists so often for Ring the character is that Ring wouldn't be here if Ring didn't resist a lot of consequences. And so like Ring kind of maybe achieve the like player characterness that lets you do resistances maybe before the game started. And so like part of it's like mechanical knowledge that I was familiar with certain things, and that resistance always works, but you don't know what the cost is going to be. So you get to make this choice of I'm going to put my marker down to redo or retell or influence what has happened, and then we'll see what the cost is. And I think resistance is also good because it's really cool because it is another way in which the conversation happens, where the GM says, okay, you rolled this, I think these are the consequences. And then the player can say, okay, but it doesn't happen this way. I'm going to resist this. And so that dance between mechanics and narrative continues beautifully with resistance.
Did Jeoi give an answer already as well?
No, Jeoi just beamed maniacally at how smart everybody else is. Just like Crossroads.
Fair enough.
For me, my answer is actually also Mike's fault. It would be flashbacks because I came to Blades having done a bunch of D&D 5e games, and D&D 5e, like the narrative and the pacing, it's very regimented and it's very much tied to the train track of mechanics, so to speak. And so when we started playing, Mike was kind of the one I was taking cues from because Mike had said that he'd played these games before. So when he started using like, okay, so this is how I use flashbacks to seg from present day, quote unquote, to how a character would have prepared. And then I move from that visually to what is going on now. And then someone else can pick up from there. For me, that was kind of the first illustration of how Blaze in the Dark kind of lends itself to like yet another level of collaborative play that didn't really quite exist at a tabletop in other settings for me before. Because the flashback doesn't just have to end with the person or the character having the flashback. Visually, again, the camera cut, the panning, the zoom in, the zoom out, the fade, it can move from one person to another at the table. And that, like seeing that in play for the first time helped kind of free the train tracks for my brain a little bit, because I was definitely coming to the table a little bit too linear for what Blades can really, really do. So yeah, it's sentimental for me.
Like I like flashbacks a lot. In a private conversation with Harper a while ago, I asked, was flashbacks like deliberately inspired by Leverage? And according to Harper, it not only didn't cross their mind, but like they hadn't seen it at that point when Blades existed, which I'm very surprised by, because flashbacks is like just functions perfectly in that sense, and encourages you to just commit to a decision because you know that there are tools that you have at your disposal to establish how it arrives there. My answer, just to state very obviously, is Devil's Bargains. If you've listened or watched the Case of the Cindered Seal, you know that I love myself a Devil's Bargain.
There was like one episode where you offered like 12 of them, and we were all like,
"Devil working overtime."
Asked for this.
Yeah, the devil is always lurking. The reason why I love Devil's Bargains is because it's a very obvious kind of mechanical resource that the GM has to give you an opportunity to gain a better role in the future. At the consequence of something bad will happen in the future, but you know what it is. You just know that it's bound to happen now. Which is also good drama because it means that you have committed yourself to the idea that you have another consequence to deal with at a later date. And I didn't want to like overburden those things with now you have an entirely different mission to commit yourself to. But I did always want to take something that someone really cared about and add stakes to that, so you knew that you could potentially benefit from this role if I knew that this role mattered. So I tried to give you as many opportunities as possible to get those things. So yeah. I have some more questions at some point. I definitely am very eager, first and foremost, to learn uh, who your favorite secondary characters are. So we're going to get into that very soon. But before then, I would like everybody to take a 5 to 10 minute break. Get some drinks, reset your body, stretch. And of course, for everyone in chat, a break for us is also a break for you. So this is your opportunity to make sure that your joints still do joint things, cycle your fluids, etc. And we will be back in a few minutes with more of this evening's post-mortem of the case of the Cindered Seal. So we'll be back in a flash, folks. we're back. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our post-mortem of the case of the Cindered Seal, our Speculate special event that took place on this channel previously, with 20 episodes that you can watch on Arvan Eleron's YouTube channel or listen via Speculate, which you can find more information about if you put !Speculate in the chat. We've been talking a lot about our experience with the game, our experience with the rules of Blades in the Dark, our experience playing with each other. Now I want to ask some very idle questions, including, what's your favorite secondary character of all of the characters that we've made in this game so far? Other than each other, what character came up in this game that was actually your favorite, that you actually dug a great deal?
I love Melvier so much.
He was just so put upon, and in the most like delightful way. It's like,
He was just
I am
so
trying
sick
to
of
keep
us.
you alive. Yeah, it's just
Yes.
like, why?
He
Why do you
was
do
having such a bad day every time he interacted with us, but he was also having comparatively the lowest stakes bad day of everybody in the cast.
Well, I did crit his house.
Yeah, there
Oh
are
yeah,
still
there
holes
was that.
There are still holes there that need to be dealt with.
Yeah, props are just going to whatever coin it gets allotted for meat temperatures and meat care is just going to go to house rebuilding. For Melvier.
Yeah, I think Melvier
because
deserves
it critted the house, it will repair the house.
I will say, as GM, I had a lot of fun playing Melvier in particular. I really enjoyed embodying someone who's just so tired all the time that he cares for you all so deeply, and yet you all just go out in the middle of the night and undo all of the delicate physicking work that he's done just minutes earlier. But also, like, Melvier was Skelly's ally on Skelly's character sheet. So I really wanted a character to be a lens through which we learned more about Skelly, and I'm I admire a great deal the scenes of just the two of them, precisely because the thing that we learn about Skelly in this moment is neither of these people really have time for anything except a little bit of like very brief and very weird time for each other, and it's always being like performed on screen as awkwardly as possible.
Yeah, and playing Skelly, like when I conceived of her initially and started playing as her, I thought of her as kind of a very Rosa Diaz character, which it's like just very withdrawn, like not the kind of person who is going to just randomly start talking to people, somebody who is not going to talk about her feelings and is just not interested in that. Not that she doesn't have friends or isn't capable of having friends, it's just not, she doesn't like to put herself out there. She doesn't like to, admit to friendship because that's feelings, and what feelings, not me. And Melvier was so kind of just like casually caring for her, and I loved that about him. And I loved that, like, it was always a little funny to roleplay their interactions for me because I'm a person who talks too much all the time in real life. And so playing as a character who I had to always just kind of sit and think, like, what is the most bare bones response I can give to everything this guy is saying? And it gave them a very good dynamic where it would be like Melvier would give this long, like, impassioned speech, and Skelly would be like, okay.
Yeah. I read my performance of Melvier as Melvier has to make a great deal of effort to be intuitive about what Skelly needs, because Skelly's never going to tell him, and if he doesn't know, Skelly will die one day. And I'm very, like, that worked very well, and I thought that was very cool. Everyone else, what are your favorite secondary characters in this game?
I'm gonna say I collectively loved the porters. Like all of the
Every single
children,
one.
they were
All of
like their
them.
own little mob of different, and they had their own personalities and their own quirks and their own interests and their own approaches to stuff, and but like as a kind of a group dynamic, they were so fun. They almost reminded me of, I don't know who here has played Wind Waker, like the Zelda game, where if you go to this one village, there's a mob of like kids just running around and they refuse to go to school, and that's their whole thing. It's like the teacher wishes they would go to school and they refuse to. And they're like a unit, but they're still individuals and I love them all. And also sometimes you have to give them a security knife.
Yes, that does indeed often need to happen. Um, Mike, I want to kind of ask, because a lot of the world building that happened for the Porters was like uniquely yours. I'm kind of curious if you had any thoughts about that, about the Porters as a collective group of characters.
Yeah, when I came to understand, or when kind of you'd built on what I'd done, the gesture toward like, oh, okay, this isn't just some teenagers and then some like early adult people. Like there are just genuinely little kids here. Like, okay, what's that like? Would it be okay? It's, people around this group of people. Okay, well, that the circle is bigger than that. And then thinking, like I probably drew some on living in a co-op in grad school, because when I was out in Eugene, I lived in a house that had between 10 and about 18 people living there, and most people had their own bedroom, but there was a lot of shared everything, and sharing chores and that kind of stuff, and just being used to being around a lot of people in a way that I was not used to as a kid, because I have one sibling who's 12 years younger than me. So for 12 years, I was an only kid in a household with two parents. And I did we had close relationships with like some parts of the extended family, but not in the everybody living in one space. So I had this like particular experience living with a lot of other people. And I kind of stretched and adjusted and used that as like a prism through which to imagine, okay, well, what is it like? What would it be like if there were a place in Duskwall that could scoop up orphans and people that don't have a place and like actually work? And so it was definitely was some like putting some utopian world building into a really scary place and trying to scale it to the point where like, okay, this feels feasible and achievable even within this scary place. And that so much of it is about how do the adults frame expectations and spaces for the kids, and how much room are they left to just be little people becoming.
And I appreciated that a lot because it gave us room to establish who are the people in this world who care, to actually like have empathy for people, obviously, because it meant that we had established that there was this entire community of children who had learned that there is somewhat of a responsibility they have not only to each other but to the space that they're in, because somebody has taken care of them, and that means that the work that they're doing is hopefully supposed to be more good than bad as often as possible, even as risky and as dangerous as it is.
Yeah, I think another thing about the game, which we've sort of touched on already, is just there are so many ways in which a grimdark setting can default to the kind of rugged individualism, or I mean, just Blades is intended to be a faction game ultimately. You have all these different factions with competing goals and priorities. They have each their own allies and enemies, and you as the player are navigating these concentric circles, these overlapping factions that are engaging with each other in different ways. And so that can intentionally creates a kind of hostility, right? A kind of internal constant conflict churn. And at the same time, what I loved about our game and the Porters specifically is that it is a form of community building that felt very positive and constructive rather than oppositional and destructive. And I think it's good because we often in again American society, we can see any sort of community as I like very Pollyanna, very unreal and optimistic, and but at the same time, that is the default in a lot of places, that you just people help each other, people work with each other, people build community with each other. And so it feels like we were able to bring that outside perspective in a very natural and reasonable way.
Hmm. And I care about that a lot because, like, that was another touchstone of the Fugitives crew sheet as well. The idea that when the chips are down, the only people that you can count on are members of your community, because the Bluecoats will go out of their way to hurt you and nobody else cares. And it was good to see us establish that we had such a community for whom that was their duty, because that was how they were surviving already. So that was really cool.
And also the question of kind of like closed communities versus open communities, where you have a closed community like the Bluecoats, where they will close ranks, they will, circle the wagon, so to speak, as soon as there is any sort of implied threat to one of their members, versus a community where when a threat is seen, it was interesting how initially in one of our early episodes, we had, may your problems be someone else's problems.
Yes.
But then we came back around to, your problems are my problems. Our problems are collective problems, and we must solve them together.
Yes, I loved the narrative journey of that phrase so much, because when it first comes in, it sounds like, fuck you, not my problem anymore. It sounds like you're bailing. And then it turns around into being a way that we are all taking collective responsibility for each other. And that was so beautiful to me. Like, that was definitely one of my favorite pieces of world building about Severosi culture and lore.
Mm-hmm. And I'm very glad that happened, because I hadn't thought about it. It never occurred to me at all, and then I started seeing things materialize, and I was like, oh, I should do something about this phrase. Like, it didn't even occur to me that it was still useful in its present state.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just kind of materialized that way, that the request is actually that you should be able to trust other people with things that are affecting you, because it's affecting them as well. So yeah, that was really cool, and it's one of the many things that I'm very glad y'all came up with for me, because I totally missed it.
I also want to show chat. Partway through the run of the series, one of my friends recommended to me that I should get the 40 Servants Divination deck by Tommy Kelly, and check it out. The Protector is the imperishable wing.
Aww.
It was such a huge moment of delight to me to be shuffling through the deck and have this come up and be like, oh, you're out there.
I need that now. I need to find this. That's rad. The universe did a thing. That's really cool.
I'm linking it in the chat.
I've seen it and I'm bookmarking it now. Thank you so very much. That's really, really cool. But continuing, Mike, who is your favorite secondary character out of everyone in the case of the Cindered Seal?
Since we've already talked about the porters, I want to shout out Hunger, because Hunger, like, there's an alternate version of this series that's much more like bog standard, where Hunger is like kind of defensive, gruff gangster man, and like we show up and then like there's a fight. The choice that you made instead to have Hunger be like, cool, I see commonality between us, and because of the tail spinning and the world building that Iori did through Ash's role play, we had this unexpected ally who was like, Hunger gives exposition, Hunger gives succor, like he doesn't ask too many questions about things that we don't want to have to talk about, and felt like, oh, okay, there's somebody else out in this world who like has people around them who count on them, and is stuck in this weird, scary city and this like all these interlocking plots, just like we are, that provided like a nice exterior mirror and provided an opportunity for Brandon as the GM to like give us some information we needed to start moving forward. So that reversal from like rival gang, like a gang leader, to ally and exposition giver and like person through which we can like establish more world building is great. And then I love that he got to come back to be a helper with the finale in the finale.
Oh gosh, that really made me tear up. I think what Mike said earlier about Ash being a mirror to Hunger was very on point, and something I wound up thinking about a lot after that finale was how they interface with community differently, because we see Ash essentially trying to do supply drops and then scram. Like, she's trying to give back without really engaging in the community. So hospitality is such a huge thing for the iteration of Severosi culture we built, and we see her constantly trying to dodge accepting hospitality until she tries to pull one over on Hunger and then deliberately asserts her right to hospitality. And previously, I think a huge reason she refuses hospitality is because she feels herself to be improperly Severosi, and therefore feels that she doesn't have as much right to it. Mm-hmm. So engaging with Hunger, who is an active part of the community, who is regularly in conversation with other people, whose support consists of properly being there instead of just throwing resources at the problem and running away, was, I think, really huge for her. And his acceptance and offer of aid in the finale is just a huge turning point for who Ash is going to be in the future. She's going to be engaging with her community in a more honest and involved way.
I think it played well into her vice too. Like there's a kind of moral philosophy that states that if you accept that there are certain rights, that it implies equal obligations on other people. So it's like if I have the right to healthcare, that implies an obligation on the part of the government or whatever to provide me healthcare. If I have a right to life, then it means there's an obligation on the part of other people to ensure that I have the ability to live, stuff like that. And so like the hospitality angle, if she accepts the hospitality, that implies an obligation that she must then extend hospitality, and that obligation, like that was her vice obligation. And and so the way that played out was really interesting and cool.
Yeah, because she had a way of interacting where she was essentially building this weird social debt by offering things to other people and dropping gifts on them and just running away, so that she was being ungenerous in not allowing people to return any favors to her, and that really isolated her from the community in a lot of ways.
Hunger was another thing that kind of generated naturally during play, because that entire situation was supposed to be hostile from jump. Like the goal that I had in mind initially was you will have to talk your way into finding information and leaving, or you'll have to be very, very sneaky and never enter the room that you entered in at that point, because anything other than that would just be like, if you were to get in a gunfight in this room, you'd obviously die. And I was trying as much as possible to avoid, because the room was available, you'd obviously have to enter into it at some point. I wanted to avoid getting in as much conflict as possible, because I didn't want the obvious only other result to come about. But when I created this room, even though I didn't know anybody's name at that point, I didn't expect any of these people to be actually potentially friendly. And then Iori, like a boss, spins this entire story, and I dug it a lot. And then I decided to lean into the possibility that someone here would be friendly, and the decision that I settled upon was essentially, what if somebody in this room was Kingpin, if Kingpin were a person of color? And it gave me the opportunity, as Valerie mentioned, to like force some engagement with hospitality onto Ash, because now you're in a position where avoiding it could be potentially hostile. Um, but also because you had taken that opportunity to establish a lot of spirituality, now I had to pay it forward by implying not only that you were speaking to somebody who was as spiritual as you're pretending to be, but that now that they expect this of you, you are now bound to this. That you are now in a position where you're expected to be consistently spiritual, and that led into you never being able to avoid all this imagery and discovering that maybe you are a little bit spiritual after all. Um, because I felt it was valuable to pay all of that forward because you had given such good play at that moment. So the thing that I like about Hunger in particular is through all of that, the thing that he reveals about himself and about a subsection of Severosi identity in this space um, is that they need that kind of closeness in order to survive, and he has been very good about ensuring that his kin in that space can find that community, even though he's essentially a gang lord. Everybody can gather in his space without fear for their life because they're all Severosi, and he will he's duty bound to extend that kindness to them as he did to you.
I think it's a very accurate reflection of how in foreign countries gangs are actually a necessary component to immigrant communities' survival because they cannot rely on official law enforcement to look after them or care about their interests.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's been a huge thing throughout Asian American history in America, where frequently, like, yes, crime bad, but also gangs were often a very necessary source of community mutual aid for an immigrant community.
Yeah, and I hadn't thought about that. Like, the space was just that building, that room in that building was just supposed to be a gambling den, and all of these people were like, there were characters who, before you had done that good RP, were supposed to be in debt, and then I was like, no, Hunger can't treat these people like that now because we've just established that Hunger is actually a nice guy. Actually, a couple of people are still in debt, but that's a decision that they made. He's not going out of his way to take advantage of people anymore, because we had given that opportunity to establish that. So Hunger is actually like very cool to me, and I credit most of that to Iori's play.
I will say actually that I think the single best bit of roleplay in that entire interaction was Crossroads doing a shot of liquor and throwing the whole shot glass down its gullet.
This is what priests do.
Yeah, priests just eat glass. That's a part of proving that you are in touch with the spirit, proving that you cannot be harmed by sharp glass.
The way that I thought about this was that actually prior to Iori like doing that amazing inspired role play was actually that Crossroads had been an augur or an ornithomancer in its meat life. So Ash's claim that Crossroads had been a priest who had basically like willingly hollowed themselves to become closer to the imperishable wing was like very, very close to what was intended. So like in my brain, I was just going, okay, if I want to become as far from meat as possible, I will drink the glass too. So that was my reasoning behind it.
Yeah, and it worked. So yeah,
I just also thought it worked really well as like a don't mess with us moment, because that sound of the glass hitting the bottom of Crossroads' stomach and breaking would be a serious deterrent to anyone trying to punch it, right?
I mean, yeah, but like also, I can't remember. Well, obviously you had just gotten in this space, so nobody here would have known that you were a Hull if you were trying to hide it. But like, Oh yeah, because also people did discover at some point, but it was before the shot glass, that this is obviously a hull. Why is there a hull here? Because getting in touch with the spirit. So like there was a lot of a lot of parts of that moment that worked in your favor, such that I didn't require a great deal of rolling after that point. So that was a lot of fun. But also, you didn't have anything to prove to Hunger at that point, because you had already taken the glass, so things were already working in your favor.
I'm really, really curious if it is ever explored later, like the relationship between Crossroads and Hunger specifically, because Hunger thinks that Crossroads does a specific thing, and Crossroads does kind of do that specific thing, but it's not to the god that Hunger thinks that Crossroads does it for.
Um, you know that thing. You know that thing that like some missionaries and shit will do, where they will come to you specifically and try to speak up the glory of their specific brand of religiosity. And if you tell them that you already have a faith, or like you have already received blessings from your specific brand of religiosity, they will try any kind of language whatsoever to justify to you that no, that's actually our god. Our god did that. That's why you're supposed to come over here. That's what Hunger would have done. Hunger would have justified in his brain that you being Taikarosi is actually the Imperishable Wing's job all along. That you should acknowledge that the Imperishable Wing was responsible for that, and no one else, nothing else.
I would like to see Crossroads meet the Imperishable Wing, because Crossroads 100% would be like, why do you look like me? Oh.
That would be curious, because I do think that the Imperishable Wing would look different to everybody. I think you just helped me realize a thing. I think
Store that for the sequel.
Sequel. Coffee shop AU sequel.
What I will say is, I think you already have. And I'm not going to tell you how.
Small friend? Oh no.
But, now that we've gotten to you, Jeoi, who's your favorite secondary character in this story?
Well, everyone's named the characters that I adore, so I'm stuck. I mean, I do have to give a shout out to the poor civilians in the Taikarosi potato shop who just had to deal with Crossroads screaming in Taikarosi, my small friend is dying, and then picking up that small friend and just dashing out the door. So shout out to those characters. Thank you, civilians.
I want so badly to just make a short film of just that, of like the elderly woman and her grandson coming in, buying a meal, sitting down, eating their meal normal, talking about like work, about how her grandson's day was, and then you all emerge, are assaulted by one man, kill him, and flee. And that's the whole movie, because that's still like etched in my brain.
To answer a little more seriously, I think I do have to say Runa, just because she appeared in so many different incarnations. It was almost like meeting multiple characters as opposed to a single Runa. Because there was the Runa that Crossroads could vaguely remember, and then there was Ghost Runa. And that was really neat, just seeing the juxtaposition. And then there was Runa in the letters, so it was like meeting 3 different people at once, and then trying to reconcile all of these 3 people were the same person. Which was a good reflection of, I think, Crossroads' journey in terms of trying to figure out what it was, in terms of being a dead thing that is still in the living world, and being able to help the living in some way. Yeah. Which was just very fascinating for me, because like once it kind of settled in my head that, okay, Crossroads was definitely created in an act of violence, because death in itself, like, it is a violent thing in Duskwall, because like the spirit doesn't just go off into the merry afterlife. hangs around, and the spirit wardens have to come and destroy it. Otherwise, it stays and it does terrible things to living people and stuff. So, regardless of how Crossroads became a whole, it wasn't active violence that made it. And then we saw how Crossroads died, and it was like, oh, it was an exceptional act of violence that made it. And so for me, that was kind of where I started leaning into the idea that, well, every time Crossroads attunes, it opens to the space like where it itself occupies as a dead thing that died in an exceptionally violent way. So it makes sense that what comes through that channel is violence. It is panic. It is some kind of electrocution to living people. Like what comes through is not going to be like, oh, I commune with the spirits like a regular whisper, I can compel them to do things. It's like, no, what comes through is the fact that I died in a really, really terrible way, and I don't remember it, but I remember being terrified, and I remember not being alive anymore.
Runa was, I mean, as previously mentioned, Runa was fun in part because I was learning terrible things about her through your play. But also I wanted, as much as possible, to develop Runa as complex in ways that were still deeply informing your character. Because the thing that I wanted Crossroads to learn first and foremost is, regardless of the fact that its present state is because of Runa, you are not bound to Runa in any way. You're doing this because it is right. You're not doing this out of any obligation. You can be your own person now. And I think that worked out very well. I still kind of feel very badly. I wanted to like Runa. Runa was perfect in my brain. It's just like, but yes, the story wants what it wants.
I think that ended up being a commonality in all of our characters, is that we came from backgrounds of intense violence in different ways and hardship. And I think one of the interesting constructions of villain versus hero characters is that often there is a sort of a choice point in which they could choose to be good or they could choose to be bad. And villains choose to be bad and heroes choose to be good. And so all of our characters essentially had those kinds of like tragic, harsh, problematic, pasts. But instead of choosing to take that and make bad things out of it, we each individually, separately chose to try to make good out of it.
Which I think matters, especially for Crossroads, because mechanically Crossroads never got a chance to choose. Because every time something went wrong, bad things just started happening. But it was a reflection of the relationship to that trauma and the source of that trauma, and not anything inherent about you. You were just experiencing panic. And that was expected because this world is now suddenly new to you, and you have been given an obligation by somebody that you technically don't even know anymore. And like I was very pleased to see you lean into that as often as possible, because it also gave us opportunities to do reckless stuff. So that was fun. So yeah, do you all have any like last thoughts about the case of the Cindered Seal, other than Coffee Shop AU, which I will work on at some point. We will actually
Can we please make the other part of the Cindered Seal, like the sticky part of the Cindered Seal, can that please be the espresso press? And then like to tamp down the grinds, can that please be why our coffee shop is so wildly successful? Because there's just a sprinkle of dark magic, and that dark magic is enjoying your life. Can we do that?
It gives the coffee just an extra kind of robusto flavor.
It tastes kind of ashy.
Well,
says the connoisseur.
That makes it very easy for us to shift over to the Hawker's playbook.
Yeah.
Right?
Love it.
When you said Hawkers, it suddenly reminded me of a thing. Like this is like one of the totally like, in the Speculate Discord, where we have all our secret chats about the stuff that we want to do. Every once in a while, we'll just like stumble upon a brilliant idea for a Blades game that we would like to do in the future. And Valerie was the one who noted idly, having looked up what is essentially the history of the lottery in Trinidad and Tobago, where I live, and like being totally surprised by how weird and unnecessarily spiritual it is. Like at like what 11 o'clock in the night or some shit like that. And I'm
I
here
don't even
like,
remember what
you are having
happened.
these feelings. I am weirdly excited that you're having these feelings, even though I hate the lottery. And that emerged in my brain as, what if y'all ran a Severosi numbers game that was somehow psychic?
Crossroads as a slot machine would be
Good.
really hilarious. It's like, you're cheating, zap.
So that is a thing at some point. It is one of the Blades games that I have saved in my brain that I would like to do at some point, because I think that would be really hilarious. But that is like way off into the future at the moment. Also, I'll just idly mention to folks in chat, if you have a question, I know we're kind of running out of time at this point, but feel free to ask us anything that you want about the game so we can, because we want to talk about it. We are here because we are excited about the thing. But yes, any final thoughts?
I want to know if anybody else had backup characters lined up. I think you really see the moment I start playing more adventurously is after I realize that Ash has a brother of the Hill the Chalk. And then I'm like, oh, okay. I know what happens if Ash dies now and I'm not scared anymore. Also, I would like to point out that the Severosi naming convention, I actually hijacked that from Terry Pratchett's Goblin Names, which I remember when I read Snuff, I thought it was just a really beautiful naming pattern, and it always stuck with me.
Okay. So if we ever
who was everyone's backup characters?
My backup character was another home, because I'm a parody of myself, who actually knew Crossroads when Crossroads was neat, and unlike Crossroads, actually remembered who he was when he was alive. And Crossroads I had imagined as someone who was more of an augur, like more passively attuning to the ghost field and like reading signs and stuff like that, whereas the secondary character would have been more combat oriented, so more War Whisper based, just because I thought, oh, Ring has bad experiences with War Whispers. What if I put a War Whisper into the group? If but that never happened, so
Mike, did you have a secondary character? I'm sure you had someone in reserve.
I didn't really think about backup characters until way later on, at which point I realized that I could also play a character's sibling, because I established August, Ring's, I think, oldest brother, and August would probably be a leech, because August is an architect, and I would very consciously have August be good at things that Ring was bad at, and bad at things that Ring was good at.
Man, now I want to know if Crossroads and August would have gotten along at all.
I don't know. I think August's worldview would maybe be more like traditionally Akarosi and have a harder time dealing with like Crossroads and everything like that. Because Ring is kind of had experiences with people from all over, and I just chose to play, like, as the white person in this group, chose to play Ring as like aspirational but clearly imperfect, as a like friend and ally to like the marginalized people of the city, whereas like he doesn't actually know everything that he needs to, or that they need to know to be a good ally, which is why you get scenes like they bring the wrong booze out with hunger, because they don't have the cultural competence to know how Severosi people think about Akarosi liquor. And I think August would just be way more clueless. That's kind of who he'd probably be, smart in a different way, which would be funny.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Had
think
no
I need
backup.
to ask Valerie this question because you were never really in danger as much as everybody
No,
else
no,
was.
but like I just was. It just no thoughts had empty. Like I would have, I would have figured something out. But
You were never really in danger.
Truffle
the GM
on the
says to the
hitter
character who got
playbook.
trauma.
just truffle, yeah. There you go. No, I mean, like, I think that I would have dealt with that problem if it arose, but for weirdly for me, because I'm an over planner, I was just kind of like, well, we'll see what happens.
Fair enough. Yes.
I probably would have played some kind of like a dock worker, somebody who knew Ring from that, or just like I tend to not go too far from the beaten path with these kinds of things, just because I think I'm not that great at I'm not a quick improver. I tend to be I'm okay with writing things and revising them, but on the fly I'm less confident. And so maybe I would have played someone equally quiet but punchy. Or maybe someone who was like a slide and all they would ever do was just whisper creepy things to people. I don't know.
So which of our one-shot characters would be the best addition to the Strange Friends?
Oh no, why would you ask that?
Ghost Puncher. Ghost Puncher.
It was Campanella, yeah.
Yeah, Campanella would be perfect.
Yeah, we
in
need
this
it. We
crew.
need a bruiser.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Because I like
But-
my leech from that, but I feel like she would have been interesting coming in as someone who knew Aldo Booker potentially from being in those circles. But I feel like it's a very different like world that she inhabits. Where Campanella, it's like
I think your leech would have actually had really interesting friction with Ring because both of them would have expected to be in charge.
Yeah.
I think Tamlin would have been really interesting as like someone to play off of Crossroads because they're both Taikarosi. And they worship different gods / demons. And yeah, so like on a metaphysical level it'd be really interesting, but mechanically we already have a whisper sort of just in a whole body.
So moving away from Blades in the Dark now, we are preparing to endeavor into an entirely new game starting from next year. We will be playing Andrew Gillis's Girl by Moonlight starting in January. I'm very excited. I know for a fact that Mike is also very excited, being the person who has in fact played Girl by Moonlight. The one person who actually has this experience and probably should be the GM but won't be because I want to see the game in action, and also because Mike insists on playing. But I'm very excited to hear what you all think about Girl by Moonlight now that you've had an opportunity to see the rules and like make some decisions about what we are expecting to play. Before we talk about our actual like play stuff, I just want to get your sense of the game itself, rules as written.
So the note that I have written down is that because Girl by Moonlight has an even more explicit episodic structure, that gives us the opportunity, if we want, to kind of from the very beginning and the form and probably the texture of play to set it apart from Cindered Seal, because in Girl by Moonlight you actually start with downtime. You do obligation, which is you do stress in reverse in Girl by Moonlight. You start out and the world stresses you off, and that's your everyday life. And you roll resistance and take stress based on how well you rolled. Then you get downtime actions, but the downtime actions aren't about removing stress. They're mostly about your relationships with other characters. And then you pick what kind of mission you want to do, and then you go do it. And then all of your stress clears at the end of the episode because episodic, like Magical Girl TV, that's a great structure to be able to do actual play within. And I'm curious whether it will serve us well or whether we will find a way to shift, expand, or twist it in the way that we kind of warped the expected play cycle in Blades.
4 episodes long.
episode.
I have no expectations anymore at this point. We'll keep going until it stops. I'm not going to keep you playing for more than a year, though. That's my only rule.
I'm just going to embroider that onto a banner. I have no more expectations at this point. Brandon O'Brien, 2021.
Put that on a shirt and I will wear it. But yeah, I'm very excited for Girl by Moonlight. I'm excited first and foremost because I love magical girl stuff. So I was already into it from that point. But using blades as the mechanical framework for that is very interesting because of all of the parts of that game that is designed to observe how much the world bears down on you. Mechanically works in a game like Girl by Moonlight, even if you are not playing a particularly dark or painful game. Like when I think about blades as a comparison point for this kind of genre touchstone, I remember the fact that Sailor Moon starts with a great deal of carnage that people never think about when they actually talk about Sailor Moon. So I'm very excited to be able to either play a thing where those kinds of potentially difficult moments take place, but there is a great deal of hope to be gleaned from them, or to play a very bright and hopeful thing where there are still stakes, but no one has to suffer a great deal for those stakes to be real. At which point I would like to ask, of course, because Girl by Moonlight is designed in such a way that there are different series, and each of those series have their own different genre touchstones, some of which are like pure magical girl stuff, and then others are attaching that kind of language to other genres, like if you wanted to play a giant mecha anime, we can do that as well. And I know that I've asked you before some of those things, but for all of these lovely people to know what might be in store in January, I'd like to know if you've thought about what kind of game you want to play. And I'll start with Iori, in fact, if you had any thoughts in particular.
I'm really interested in the Maze of Dreams playset. That one looks super exciting to me, particularly because of the idea that all characters are to some extent complicit. And Brandon, we were talking about this in Discord, but the concept of complicity necessitating redemption
I'm big on redemption.
is really compelling to me.
Yeah, I'm a big redemption nerd personally. Ask me about Kamen Rider. Anyhow, I think that in A Maze of Dreams would be actually a lot of fun to consider the possibility that people are not evil, just engaging in evil things. So that will be fun. Valerie, what do you think about this series that already exists in the game so far?
I'm interested in a lot of them. I feel like Sea of Stars is really interesting because it essentially is like a space opera type thing, and I mean I'm a sucker for that stuff. But even just more generally, I think one of the things that really interests me, I am also a sucker for concealed identities and the ways in which people interface with each other differently based on the facades, the masks that they're wearing versus, you know, who they are perceived to be in sort of in their real selves. And like the one of the magical girl shows that I have most recently loved is Miraculous Ladybug. And that one is most fun to me because of the fact that there is essentially a love square. It's worse than a love triangle. And it's a love square, but they're each character is in love with there's only two characters.
Mm-hmm.
But each one is in love with a different identity of the other person. So you have the one character who's in love with the mundane identity of the other, and the other character who's in love with the secret identity of the other. And it just creates this bizarre, hilarious tension throughout the entire show. And so, like, that's not a space opera show at all. It is modern Paris. But just that kind of, how do you interface with people when you don't know who they are? How do you become more yourself when you are wearing a mask? I love that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool. Mike, I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts.
So I really like mech stuff. I've gotten to play a beam saber game with a home group, and that was pretty fun. But it was cool because we did collaborative world building, and we ended up with like stuff that pushed things in very different directions. I love the way that the engines are designed in On a Sea of Stars, where the engines, which are the mecha, are these like deeply emotional but fairly alien beings, where they have virtues and impulses. So you might have an engine that is serene, wounded, and feral. And you get bonuses, like, so you characterize these engines. And so it's not like, it's more the kind of mecha that's like Evangelion, Escaflowne, and like some of the other stuff where like the mecha has more personness to it, and that you get those relationships, which is really interesting. I also think, like, I loved the 2000s Battlestar Galactica, and if you wanted to play Battlestar Galactica but Magic Girls, On a Sea of Stars is what you use to do that, because the characters are constrained by institutions.
Mm-hmm.
But so I think I'm very excited about that one if we can do it. Otherwise, I think I would probably lean toward In the Kingdom of Dawn, which is the playset that most aligns with a certain version of Sailor Moon or the Netflix She-Ra or like Steven Universe. So tonally, it is probably the most toward like bright, hopeful. And a thing that I like about it is that you say, so the three principles are: give monsters human hearts, make adversaries not villains, and let the mundane world give voice to the abyss. So for me, it's a very humanist and humanizing playset where you're encouraged to see the personness and the worth of everybody in the game. So like in the version of Cindered Seal that uses this, like Casta is like a season-long villain who then maybe gets a glimpse at redemption over the course of a later season. And like that toolkit of theme is very exciting to me.
Yeah. You said you made that statement just now, and in my brain it congealed specifically as, is Casta Catra?
I feel like so I said Azula, but again, I also have come to Azula's defense because, and I think the key difference here is Casta has been doing this. Like Casta is Azula if she never is reformed, right? But Azula she is literally a teenage girl. Like as a teen, the idea of say, you know, even Iroh, who's like, yeah, no, she's crazy and she needs to go down. It's like, he's not wrong, but also she's not irredeemable. She is a child. And the idea that a child can be irredeemable is, I think, a very horrifying aspect of the American criminal justice system. And I do not choose to accept it. On the other hand, and so that's how I feel about Catra too. So it's like you are a child. You're all children. Oh my God! Somebody please be a grown up and help these children. So yeah, like I can see Casta being played as a Catra character more if she was younger, whereas she has been sort of irredeemable for a long time. She'd have to do a lot of redeeming for me to be okay with her as a redeemed villain.
Casta is definitely somebody I see as like, she got that look at herself a long time ago, and then she just kind of cemented herself into it.
Yeah.
Because she had that look, she saw the amount of work it would take to become someone different, and was like, no, I don't want to do it. Because the amount of work frightens me, or the idea of becoming different frightens me. This is safer. I'm staying here.
Yeah, and that's kind of Catra too. And at the same time, I have not watched the final season, so I'm going to not talk about what might or might not happen in the final season. But yeah, like I think that is something that we can explore potentially in this game is the notion of someone who has done bad things and had that what some might refer to as that come to Jesus moment where it's like, wait a minute, I love Josh, or I'm a terrible person in this case. And sorry, I quote Clueless a lot, but so just that notion of they have the moment where they are allowed to have that reflection, and they choose to stop being bad, and that's what makes them not a villain anymore. But then it is still a long way to redemption. And playing a game like this, where you are on that path to redemption, interests me as well.
Mm-hmm. And I will speak a little bit more to that. But Yoi, what series are you feeling right now for Girl by Moonlight?
For me, I'm much like Crossroads, a weird amalgamation of the rest of the party. So, Sea of Stars intrigues me purely because, again, Mike, it's your fault. Where Mike, in the Discord, went, oh yeah, if Crossroads hop dimensions, it became an engine. And I went, oh no, I want to be that now. But that's not something that you can play in the place that you can't be the engine. Maze of Dreams also super intrigues me just because the idea of navigating a by definition liminal space really intrigues me. As you may have detected from me being Crossroads, who is a dead character moving through living space and not quite being anchored anywhere, that sort of idea slash theme slash setting really appeals to me for a number of personal reasons, but also just because the idea of liminal spaces has always kind of echoed or resonated in me. When I was a child, I really, really loved folklore or fairy tales where the mortal character goes to a place and then goes back to where that place might be, but it's gone, or they come back and, oh, the living world around me is changed irrevocably and I'm somehow the same, but also extremely different in a way that I can't articulate, and my journey has changed me fundamentally. And I can't say exactly why, but I'm very, very not whatever I was before by virtue of having been in a place that had nothing to do with me whatsoever. It affected me and I did nothing to cause it except to exist in that space. So Maze of Dreams really appeals to me. And also just what Mike said earlier about the Kingdom playset just being the most bright, hopeful. The last couple of years have been kind of a disaster in general. I just really want some bright, hopeful stuff scheduled into my daily life. So that would
hard
be nice.
same.
Yeah, so I'm just because there's one I was scrolling through them and there was one that explicitly called itself out as this is the tragic one. I'm like, not that one. It sounds great. And if we had not all gone through the last 2-3 years together, I would be all up for it, but I am tapped out on playing tragedy.
Yeah.
It's like every time I play a BioWare game, I have a friend who does a Darkest Timeline playthrough, and me, I'm like, no, my power fantasy is to be awesome and save people. So I'm gonna do that one.
Sometimes I try to do it, but then the things that comes out of Shepard's mouth when you take the bad options are just so terrible and embarrassing. I'm like, oh, my mom's gonna hear me say this. I need to turn the game off.
Yeah, because the Girl by Moonlight has very different action rating names. So the actions in Girl by Moonlight are express, forgive. So you could you're fighting an enemy and they're a big plant person and they've become they've kind of become sour in some way because their resentment they've internalized fear and anger about their looks, and so it's become resentment. And you could overcome the enemy by like empathizing with them or forgiving them for what they've done because they believe that they are beyond redemption. And like, so it's like, it takes big swings and paints with big brushes. And that's in any playset.
Mm-hmm. So, mechanically, one of the things that I dig a lot about Girl by Moonlight and why I'm very excited to play it is because of that. And Iori will get this very immediately because for our other podcast, Righteous Kicks, where we geek out about Kamen Rider, we recently finished Kamen Rider Forze, which is my favorite Kamen Rider series. Yes, I'm gonna geek out about Kamen Rider now. You can't avoid it. And actually, very tellingly enough, because it is the Christmas episode. There is a 2-part episode where there's this kid who's very frustrated because he's like trying to finish this painting for a Christmas event that he wants to like donate to some children, but he thinks that everybody else's attempts to give back during the holiday season is like bad and wrong, and everybody should be doing it his way. So when he gets the power to essentially do harm to people via transforming into a monster, transforming into a Zodiacs, the protagonist, Gentaro, has the option at any point to like fight this guy because he's being kind of an ass. But instead, he meets the guy idly in the forest while he's itching for a fight and tells him, "No, I'm not here to fight. In fact, I'm going to prove to you that the idea that you have about how you're supposed to give back during the Christmas season is wrong. And I'm going to prove it to you by proving to you that I can paint better than you." Can Gentaro paint? No! It's made worse by the fact that he paints with his foot. And then the guy looks at this terrible thing that he has made and learns that he made it earnestly and that's all that matters. So he just stops doing the thing. He just puts the thing down. And I want moments like that in this game, where instead of having to resolve via conflict, you get the opportunity to meet your opponent and go, "This is not right, and I am going to do everything that I can, short of violence, to prove it to you." And then they just learn that it wasn't right, and put the evil thing down.
That said, it was really weird that there was an episode about the spirit of Christmas, because the spirit of Christmas over here is going on dates. Like, it's just Valentine's 2 Electric Boogaloo.
The history of
And
Christmas
KFC.
The history of Christmas in Kamen Rider varies wildly from Christmas actually has like deep spiritual significance all of a sudden to what if your mall Santa was actually a confidential informant for the police? It's very weird. It's very weird.
I mean, Elf on the Shelf. There's precedence. I'm just saying.
Elf on the Shelf is some panopticon bullshit.
Santa is basically a cop. Let's be real.
I mean,
he's a cop who sneaks into people's houses and gives them presents. I don't know.
He's a cop that rewards wonderful people, but still a cop, undeniably.
Well, he rewards rich people mostly, so.
Yeah. I know that like all of your answers so far are still varying wildly, but I will hint at a thing just idly because if folks have been following my Twitter, I kind of mentioned the other day a part of this thing, but I will put it out here now. I am in favor of every series of Girl by Moonlight because I'm in favor of Girl by Moonlight and I want to do some wild stuff with you all. But, and I need to assert first and foremost, even though I am DGM, I do not have any authority in the matter. I am not saying this to force anyone's hand. I really love In a Maze of Dreams. I love it because it gives me an opportunity to consistently remind the audience that Paprika is greater than Inception. And it gives me an opportunity, like Jeoi said, to envision liminal space because I'm very fond of the idea of dream space as having weird and incomplete physical rules and trying to perform that in like the sense of stuff like Persona that I think would be really, really cool. I do want to do a lot of these redemption things in part for people who are not doing bad things. They're simply complicit in the fact that bad things are happening and are now given the opportunity not merely to stop doing bad things, but to actively aid you in the business of attempting to undo this. But the thing that has been giving me the most delight during this potentially horrendous holiday season is, very idly a couple of days ago, I started writing names for aliens on this sheet of paper. I'm not going to show you them. I just need you to know that there is this thick pile of words over here.
This is the first time you've held up a sheet of paper that didn't just bleed into your background.
I'm sure somebody's going to screenshot
trying to stay
that and
visible
enhance.
for our benefit.
Somebody's going to screenshot that and enhance, and I hope that they realize that my handwriting is illegible. I write in code for me. But I'm very excited to do dream things and conspiracy things, because I'm very excited to explore the idea that in again the vein of some Kamen Rider series like Kamen Rider Forze, Kamen Rider Double, where people know that they are essentially making a pact with a community of people who are giving them dark power, but nobody knows what that is. They just know there's a guy on the street, and if you meet him at the right time with a water cash, he'll just give you this cool thing. And I'm very excited to explore the idea that a lot of people's complicitness in that conspiracy is that they do not know that what they're doing is connected to it. They just know that it's wrong but are willing to do it. So I think
Wait a minute.
interesting.
Are we gonna talk about Serial Experiments Lane? Because I could talk about Serial Experiments
Yes,
Lane.
Yo! I haven't watched Lane in so long. That's one of the things that I'm going to revisit before we start.
That was a touchstone for me.
I'm gonna get my bear suit.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Serial Experiments Lane is one of the two primary touchstones shouted out in the game doc for In a Maze of Dreams. So you are in sync. Interestingly, the touchstones for On a Sea of Stars are Die Buster and Vision of Escaflowne. Ava is not in there.
Yeah.
Or is it that Ava's too obvious?
I was actually thinking that.
I just had to Google that, and they renamed Topuo Nerai what?
I'm curious this moment that you're having, but Mike, to that thought, interestingly enough, when I read that series, the touchstone that emerges for me based on those elements of the mech that you get the ability to qualify isn't actually Evangelion first and foremost. It's a thing that I don't think I enjoy, but enjoyed kind of, which is Voltron Legendary Defender. Version of Voltron. Just that version of Voltron.
Cut the last season. The last season didn't happen. The rest of it, though.
The last season cut the last two. Cut
the last two episodes.
Cut the last season and the first episode of the season before it, if I'm not mistaken. Like, just kind of wipe certain things off the map of that. Just get rid of.
I would say Lotor. We'll just
get rid of all of Lotor. Get rid of everything that we learn later about Shiro.
I love Lotor as a foil to Allura, but we're getting to now. We're just talking about.
Now it's just anime feelings on our Vanilla Run.
Yes.
One of these days we're just gonna do that, We're just gonna gather on a Sunday and say, I watched the thing and we have feelings. But yes. Again, me not foisting my feelings upon you, but I am very eager in particular for Maze of Dreams, because I think that it would be very emotionally cathartic. I'm particularly fulfilled to give people a lot of, not Persona feelings, because Persona is a lot, but a lot of what if you get into your dreams and discover beautiful things about yourself? If you're into that. But also aliens. So yes.
So either because we do Maze of Dreams, or if we don't do it, at some point we can play Voidheart Symphony, which I think has some substantial overlap with what a Maze of Dreams is going for. Because it's one of its biggest touchstones is Persona, and it's like it's very tarot themed, and the various tarot major arcana represent important relationships that the various characters have, and that part's cool.
Voidheart Symphony is really dope, which is like on a list of things that I want to play on this channel. Another part of the reason why I'm drawn to On a Maze of Dreams, obviously, is I designed a belonging outside belonging hack called what's the name of that, right? Am I remembering the name of this correctly? I haven't looked at it in so long. Where is... Hold on.
I found it.
Aha, right. It's called Evoker's Pact, which is essentially a belonging outside belonging hack that is very heavily influenced by Paprika and the original series Charmed, even though I like the sequel, but I wrote it before the sequel, which is essentially the exact same thing. You enter into people's dreams and make sure that bad things don't happen to those dreams, because it will have an effect on the people that they become. Because I thought that was a lot of fun to like process, like personally, like the idea that you get to restore the value that people have in themselves by ensuring that they don't doubt themselves in their own dreams. So I'm very interested in trying to fulfill that in game as well. But so I say all of this to say my intention was for you to learn that we were going to do a cool thing in January, and now we haven't narrowed it down. So I guess in January you'll discover that one of the cool things that we had in mind is possible. Did I just freeze?
Dun dun dun.
Did I just freeze?
You did, but you're back. Yay!
Oh,
Go
Lord.
planet.
Okay, wow. I guess OBS really didn't want you to learn what I was about to say. But yes, I had this entire plan that this would be the evening that we essentially revealed to you the exact cool thing that we had planned in January, and we haven't narrowed it down yet. But I guess we could just have a vote right now, but that vote is not for everybody else to witness. I'm just willing to say that I'm very open to everything that everybody has in mind. I have my own desires, of course, but I'm here to fulfill your own first and foremost. I just hope that they include in a Maze of Dreams. Clear throat. But yes, I'm very excited. I'm very glad to be able to play with y'all, because y'all are dope. I've mentioned before on Speculate, but now that Cindered Seal is done, I will mention again that this is the most GMing experience that I've ever had. And I'm kind of surprised that it went well. I spent a lot of Cindered Seal in particular thinking that every time that I learned a new good thing, I felt like a kind of shame that I wasn't applying it as early as possible to you all, and I'm very grateful that you were also gracious to me in this process, because I think that this was really fun, and I'm really excited to do a thing with you all again.
I'm very excited to see what magical things we're going to be.
I am looking forward to this.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
And there will probably be a other 2022 Speculate show. But
Indeed.
that it probably will not be a second Strange Friends game, scheduling wise and other stuff. But just to communicate to folks that are watching that I'm very, very excited about this. And on top of that, there may be some other Speculate stuff in 2022 that you should be excited about.
Mm-hmm. No hints. Nothing you can give us this evening.
I think Greg and Brandon and I need to have a conversation again to check in and like communicate a number of things about what we want from various series and how stuff is going to operate. So I don't want to promise something here and then change our minds. I would rather say that it's in discussion, but whatever it is, I'm sure it's going to be awesome because we have a great triumvirate and a amazing troupe of people that we play with.
This is true, and I'm very excited to hear more about that. I say that like I'm going to be out of the loop like everybody else, and then I remember that I'm actually also a host of Speculate.
You are the loop.
Yeah, I'm part of the loop. I will be hearing the tales from the loop as it. Yes, I'm sorry, I made that joke. So yeah, without further ado, now that we've crossed 3 hours and it's getting quite late, I just want to hear finally what are your last thoughts? What are your feelings about what we've done and what we're about to do? Starting with Valerie.
I loved this game. I loved playing it. I looked forward to it every week, every month rather, and it was just a delight to be able to, be here with all of you. And I'm really looking forward to, I guess, kind of doing the same thing, but in a different system and in a slightly different way.
Nice. I'm very sorry, I will briefly say my internet did a thing in the middle of everything that you were saying. Which sucks. I'm sorry. I don't know what's happening. Either OBS or my internet connection didn't love me very briefly.
Catch her on the replay.
Oh god. But yes. Thank you for that. Next, Mike.
Yeah, I will keep the biographical aspect of this very short. Much of my life, the process of making friends has been intertwined with playing role-playing games. So I was already primed for that to be a very powerful experience, and getting to know all of these other folks much better and becoming more friends, or kind of becoming friends at all, because some folks I didn't really know very much in any way before the game, has been an amazing process. And like Valerie said, the process of collaborative storytelling is so heartening for me, and it fills my heart up. It makes me very happy. It is very fulfilling, and y'all are wonderful. And it's also extra great to be able to share that process with people, so that we are selling stories amongst ourselves for one another that also then we get to share with others, and that's really cool. And so Cindered Seal has been a marvelous example of that. I will be sad to see it go, but part of how stories work is that stories end, and that's how we make sense out of our brains. And there is great energy in being able to finish a thing on purpose and then getting to start something new.
Nice, thank you. Jeoi, what are your thoughts?
For me, it was an exercise in many, many new things, so many new things, perhaps +1 too many new things for my brain to handle, because it was a new way of approaching how to play a character. Again, usually I have everything all fleshed out, and this time I went with the play sheet, a name, that was it. I was just going, well, sure, hope this works. And it just turned out so great. And again, like, I don't know, the spirit of the group and the spirit of this play space was just very safe and very welcoming. And I think without that, it wouldn't have gone, the journey would not have been as amazing and fostering of growth as it would have been. So looking back, I definitely can't imagine going through the Cindered Seal journey with any other group of people or with any other group of characters, even just because it all fit together so nicely, and we all played off of each other as characters and as people in such a specific way. And for me personally, I definitely was not ready to say goodbye to these characters. To the point where I like started writing extra stuff because I was like, I need to process all of this before we do Girl by Moonlight, otherwise it's all going to leak through. So yeah, I just have a lot of love in my heart for this entire journey, this 20 episode, 4 episode series that we did.
Nice, thank you. And Iori.
It was just so special to be able to do this, and I'm glad that I got to do this with this team on this channel with this audience. Not to get all parasocial at you, audience, but you have been great. It has been fantastic having you here cheering us on, throwing inspirations at us to direct the course of the story yourselves, and helping us resist. This was a really exciting new experience. I am delighted by it. And I'm really looking forward to the next one. And my problems will continue to be other people's problems, and their problems will continue to be mine. And I'm really happy about that.
Gosh, that's wonderful. As for me, I mean, I will keep my biographical stuff short as well. I don't get to play with a lot of people IRL. Most of my opportunities to both interact with other people and enjoy RPGs are always digital. Not just during insert 2020 to 2021, but mostly overall. And that used to be very difficult for me. And I'm very grateful in particular not only to have had an opportunity to play a thing that I really enjoyed and have that story be as beautiful and enjoyable as it was, but I am particularly grateful that it has given me the opportunity to bond with all of you in particular. And I'm looking very much forward to being able to continue that through line with the Girl by Moonlight and with whatever comes beyond that point, because you will all always continue to be my strange friends, and I'm very grateful to be with you all.
Our strange GM is giving us feelings again.
Oh Lord!
Oh,
It's the holiday season. It's the time for feelings.
Strange feelings.
So with that, thank you for spending this time with us, everyone, in chat on this day after Porter's Day, as we rambled a bit about the case of the Cindered Seal. Know for a fact that there will be some Blades in the Dark in the future. Maybe you'll see Casta again. Maybe you'll see Nearly Crickets again. I need to give that cop a name. And obviously we have plans to do a whole lot of other very beautiful and lovely things. But in January, at a time to be decided, but you will learn very soon, hopefully before the year is through, when we plan to do our first, what will be our session 0 for Girl by Moonlight. When that happens, you will find out on Twitter, like everything else. Until then, until that point when we will meet to play, I will ask all of these lovely strange friends of mine to please let everyone know who you are, what you do, and where people can find you. Starting with Valerie.
Once again, I am Valerie Valdes. I am a writer. I am also occasionally a poet for my sins. I stream as the kids are asleep here on Twitch. So does my husband. I will be here tomorrow night playing Secret of Mana, in which we just saved Santa Claus for mysterious reasons. I don't know why he's in this game. And you can also catch me playing Mass Effect on Tuesdays and Horizon Zero Dawn on Wednesdays. And you can buy my books in stores, and one of them, Prime Deceptions, goes on sale tomorrow. So if you're going to buy that one, wait until after midnight, at which point it should be $1.99. You can find me on Twitter at Valerie Valdes.
Next, Mike.
I want to make sure to shout out Rudy Basso, who is our audio editor on the podcast versions. It is due to Rudy's work that if you enjoyed this show on podcast, you are able to do so. So shout outs to Rudy for the role that he plays in bringing people the case of the Cindered Seal and all the stuff that we do on Speculate for the podcast.
And so we're sorry about how often we spike our audio.
Yes, we are very sorry. And I
very excitable.
I specifically also want to shout out Rudy because this is the point where I tell all of you lovely people in chat that when you support us via the Speculate Patreon, you are almost uniquely only paying for Rudy to edit our audio. And not only is Rudy doing very damn good work right now, but we would love very much to be able to do all kinds of other wild stuff with our productions in future. So your support of the Speculate Patreon allows us to do so because, as Triffity Mats mentions in chat, audio editing is hard work. It's very difficult. I say this as somebody who is on several podcasts. This actually takes a great deal of effort. So thank you so very much if you are supporting. And if you would like to, please check out speculatesf.com.
And for me, I'm Mike, writing as Michael R. Underwood. My latest novel is the found family space opera Annihilation Aria. And if you like it, you should buy Valerie's books. I stream on Sundays and Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern at twitch.tv/turbotango. And I have been your spider, Ring Downmore, they, them. Ring's plots will continue in season 2, if we get season 2. I don't know what's going on. This is all lovely. I'm done.
Next, Jeoi.
Hello, hello, Yoi Gawain Lin, pronouns he, they. I have played Crossroads for the case of the Cindered Seal, being in it's for Crossroads. And Crossroads will continue to panic at some point in the future, whether or not we have a season 2, because that is a constant of the universe. I am the game and fiction writer. You can find me on Twitter at This Is My Design, capital DASEIN. And yeah, that is me.
Nice. And Iori.
Iori Kusano, they, them, Clarion West class of 2017. I have been our lurk of the Flame the Ash, who will continue to unknowingly purvey cursed objects to the citizens of Duskfall. Oops. You can find me on Twitter at Iori Kusano, kusanoiori.com, fiction in Apex and Frozen Wavelets, and forthcoming from Baffling Magazine, issue 7 in April, but if you're on Baffling's Patreon, you'll get it in February because it's a romance. Sort of. With nanomachines and shit. Love you, chat. You've been great.
I also am in love with nanomachines, so yes. As for me, I have been Brandon O'Brien, your humble stage manager for the case of the Cindered Seal. I am one of the co-hosts of Speculate, which you can find out more about at speculatesf.com. Again, please support us via Patreon so we can pay Rudy Basso to do cool things to our voices. I am a poet, writer, and game designer from Trinidad and Tobago, and I designed the Fugitives crew sheet that our strange friends used in the case of the Cindered Seal, which you can learn more about at therisingtides.itch.io. I am being reminded again that I am a Hugo winner. I have difficulty even saying the thing aloud. I'm the former poetry editor of Fire, a magazine of black speculative fiction, which has won a Hugo Award, and I'm very excited to be able to, at some point, figure out how to put that in my bio. So yes, you can find out more about me at The Rising Tides on Twitter, at The Rising Tides _ on Twitch, where I sometimes stream, mostly just chatting stuff and attempts to play Magic the Gathering very poorly. And yeah, that's me for the most part. again, a lovely reminder to everyone in chat that your support of this channel comes in various different ways by supporting the Patreon, which you can find out more about at !Arftreon, by subscribing to the YouTube channel, which you can find out more about at !Arftube, by joining the Discord at !Arfcord, and by following by following Greg on Twitter at !Arftweets, where you can hear our friend Arvin Elron being consistently erudite and thoughtful on a regular basis, even during the holidays when he is not really expected to actually have smart things to say, but because it's Greg, he has no choice but to be smart, so he can't really avoid it. You can find out more about Speculate again at speculateSF.com, and at and if you check out !Our shop, you can find the merch store where you can find all kinds of cool things related to the content on this channel, which again, I would like very much to add a thing to that merch. So sometime very soon, maybe, hopefully, I would like that thing to happen, so that you will probably hear more about that at some point. And yeah, it's very late, and I don't want to keep all of you here very late while we continue perhaps mingling and having a fun time for the evening. But I hope that you all have been having a lovely holiday season. I hope that if you, by some unfortunate stretch of fate, have been struggling during this period or during this year, that you find the things that give you joy and give you comfort, and that the beginning of 2022 will give you a great deal of new fortune and new joys with which to delight yourself in. I hope that Girl by Moonlight will be one of those delights, because we are, as we have already confessed, duty bound to give you some hope and some joy in the new year, and we're hoping that you will stick around to witness some of that with us. But that's in January, and we're still in December. So until then, I hope that you have a wonderful day, a wonderful rest of your week, and we will see you all very, very soon. Until then, have a good night, everyone.